Chapter 347. Wooming raised an eyebrow at Stheno and Euryale's shameless request. You two really know how to take advantage of the situation. Why did he say that? It was because Stheno and Euryale seemed to have been connected when they came into contact with Wu Ming. They knew Wu Ming's identity. He was an extremely powerful and majestic legendary dragon from beyond this world, the Dragon of Origin. The two of them knew about the dangers of the Holy Grail War, so they wanted to protect Anna. However, they were unable to protect Anna, so they wanted Anna to kill her and recreate the legend of the Gorgon monster. The appearance of the Gorgon meant that they had the power to protect themselves, but Wu Ming disrupted their plan. However, through Wu Ming, Stheno and Euryale found the hope of protecting Anna, so they made the request. Sister, Anna looked at Stheno and Euryale, touched. Although she was already dead, and her safety was no longer a concern, she was still happy to hear that someone cared about her. Sure enough, no matter what, my sister still loves me, Anna thought to herself. However, Stheno and Euryale stood up as if they were interrogating him. They walked to Wu Ming and looked into his eyes. So what's your answer? The two asked in unison. I didn't want to fight the other servants. My goal is to solve this disaster, Wu Ming said in confusion, which made Stheno and Euryale a little unhappy. However, now is the time for the servants to unite. Of course, I won't abandon Anna, my ally. Wu Ming put his hand on Anna's head. Then, Anna slapped Wu Ming's hand away. Don't touch my head. Anna stared at Wu Ming with her small eyes under the hood. She was especially intimidating. Wu Ming raised his hand that was slapped away by Anna and smiled awkwardly. Stheno and Euryale smiled as well. Of course, they were laughing because Wu Ming was defeated by Anna. Wu Ming looked at his hand in confusion. That shouldn't be. May you and the others like it when I touch their heads. Did my affinity aura lose its effectiveness after becoming an assassin? Wu Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about it. By the way, you two are now someone else's servants, right? Wu Ming looked at Stheno and Euryale. That's right. Our master is a green tall hat man. Stheno nodded. She must have used the Holy Grail to cheat, Euryale said. That's how she was able to summon the 7 servants again. And it doesn't exclude the possibility that he can continue to summon servants. Wu Ming nodded. Stheno was right. After all, Wu Ming did not feel that Lev was a human being. Since he could maintain the contract of 8 servants, including Artoria, he was definitely not an ordinary person. However, it did not exclude the possibility that Lev had placed the contract on Artoria's heart, which was the Holy Grail. You wrapped this chain around me to prevent my master from using the command incantation, right? Euryale raised her small hand. The silver-white chain with golden light decorated her like a priceless accessory. I have one too. Is this a slave's chain? Stheno also raised his wrist and said with a wicked smile. Although it's a simplified version of Enkidu, it's still a divine weapon. It's still effective against gods, Wu Ming explained. Although I wanted to kill you to be safe, I still had some questions to ask you, so I kept you two alive. Now it seems that you two are really a burden, Wu Ming said with disdain. Don't talk about my sister like that. Anna glared at Wu Ming angrily. Her face, under the cloak, was full of dissatisfaction. Then, Sakura Madu woke up. Wu Ming was able to escape from Anna's glare. Wu Ming even wondered if he would be petrified if Anna glared at him for a while longer. Wu Ming then took out some high-level rune stones and sealed Stheno and Euryale's mana. He also added a series of negative buffs to their attacks. Of course, Wu Ming only did this after they agreed. After all, Wu Ming was not a bad person. Cough, cough. Soon, Olga Marie finished giving Roman her orders. Anyway, you will replace me as the commander of Chaldea for now. We'll talk about it after I return, Olga Marie said with an imposing tone as she flipped her hair. Yes, sir. Roman was also affected by Olga Marie's imposing manner. He nodded solemnly. However, Wu Ming shook his head regretfully when he heard Olga Marie's last sentence. After all, Olga Marie was already dead. She could now be considered a heroic spirit. Other humans could enter the heroic spirit palace after death, but Olga Marie would disappear after this crisis was resolved. Moreover, she would truly die She wouldn't exist in the heroic spirit palace. If possible, I'd better save her. Wu Ming thought to himself. No matter what, Olga Mary was still half a servant to Wu Ming. Even if she had bad intentions at the beginning, Wu Ming now understood Olga Mary. He felt that Olga Mary was still a good person. If he could save her, he should. Are you done with your discussion? Can you answer my question? Wu Ming and the other servants walked towards Olga Marie, Gadotsi, and the others. Stheno and Urali naturally followed Wu Ming. As for Anna, she followed her sister. This resulted in Olga Marie, Matthew, and Gadotsi standing on one side, while Wu Ming, Stheno, Urali, Anna, and Anna's master, Sakura Madu, stood on the other side. The situation was slightly serious. Wu Ming had 4 servants on his side, while Olga Marie only had Matthew, a demi-servant. At best, he was a human with the power of a servant, but at worst, he was a half-servant. Looking at the slightly tense scene, Roman on the other side of the screen gulped. What do you want to know? Olga Marie calmly looked at Wu Ming, her nominal servant. Please tell me where you came from and your intentions. I will judge whether you can get our help based on your answers. Wu Ming looked into Olga Marie's eyes. Although with Wu Ming's hearing, he was almost as good as Stheno and the others when they were pooping. Is this why you volunteered to be my servant? Olga Marie couldn't help but ask. That's not the point. The point is the name you called when you were in danger. Leviticus, when she heard the name Lev from Wu Ming's mouth, Olga Marie's eyes suddenly shrank. You know, or no, Rafe. Chapter 348. Then, Wu Ming told them about his exploration of the Yuanzhong mountain, where he met Saber and a man in a green tall hat, who called himself Rafe Lenore Floros. He killed Saber's master, and put the Holy Grail into Saber's heart in an unknown way, and according to Rafe, he received the king's order to exterminate the human race. Then, when I wanted to attack Rafe, Saber used the Holy Grail to activate the noble phantasm, and I was blown away. Stheno and the other 7 servants were summoned after I was blown away. Wu Ming's words made Olga Marie, Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman show an expression of disbelief. That man gave us the order to destroy all the creatures in this city, but I always feel that he wanted to get rid of this man. Stheno looked at Wu Ming, and it was obvious that this man was Wu Ming. In short, I always feel that this Rafe should be the Rafe that you said has been sacrificed. That's why I followed you, Olga Marie. Wu Ming finished and waited quietly. After all, Olga Marie and the others needed time to digest. It's unbelievable. Professor Rafe, actually, Roman on the other side of the screen said with a somewhat dull voice. Professor Rafe gave me a pretty good impression. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head. Well, Professor Rafe is very popular in Chaldea. I didn't expect. Matthew's eyes dimmed. I don't allow you to insult Rafe. Suddenly, Olga Marie roared and interrupted them. Rafe is dead. Even if he is still alive, Rafe would not want to destroy the human race. Although Olga Marie was shocked, she didn't waver because of soundless, one-sided words. Let's not talk about the fact that Rafe was at the center of the explosion in the control room. It's impossible for him to survive. Furthermore, even if Rafe is still alive, he has no reason to destroy human beings like you said, Olga Marie argued. So, I don't believe what you said. I don't think Rafe would do such a thing. In the end, Olga Marie stared at Wu Ming's eyes, quite like an angry little female cat. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile. He knew that this would be the result. When facing danger, her first reaction was to ask Rafe for help. It seemed that Olga Marie really relied on Rafe. People's hearts are unpredictable. Although Rafe is a kind and reliable person in your eyes, you are too dependent on him and ignored his negative side. What if he is pretending? Wu Ming began to preach to Marie. You? Olga Marie glared at Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming interrupted Olga Marie, who was about to say something. And, weren't you in the center of the explosion center? Wu Ming's words were like a sharp thorn that pierced the hearts of the Chaldeans. Yes, why was the director in the center of the explosion alive? Since there was already an example, it was not unacceptable that Rafe, who was in the center of the explosion, was still alive. Moreover, if the explosion was arranged by Rafe, it's not strange that he is alive. Wu Ming's words were very heavy. This sentence, like a sharper thorn, pierced everyone's heart. Now, Gadotsi and Matthew were completely confused. On the other hand, Roman had a thoughtful look on his face. But Olga Marie still didn't believe and wanted to refute Wu Ming's words. Well, it's also possible that someone pretended to be Rafe, first to frame him, and second to deceive people. Wu Ming's tone was light. He shrugged his shoulders and waved to the crowd. In an instant, the original atmosphere was like a balloon burst by Wu Ming's words. Everything is possible. Ha ha! Wu Ming laughed. The nervous crowd suddenly relaxed. Assassin. Then Olga Marie, who felt like she had been played, was furious again. Ha ha! Looking at the arrogant Olga Marie angry, Wu Ming couldn't help but laugh. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman were relieved. Assassin is right. It's also possible that someone used the image of the dead Professor Rafe to do evil. Matthew said righteously, and you still have the task to solve the singularity. And according to Assassin, this singularity was caused by the guy who pretended to be Rafe. Roman continued Matthew's words. Then we are bound to confront the fake, damn it. How dare he pretend to be Rafe? I must teach him a lesson. Olga Marie also calmed down, but they still talked about the guy who pretended to be Rafe. Then everyone, let's work hard together. Gadotsi clenched her fists and encouraged everyone with a smile. Of course there's no problem with Assassin. But you, sleepyhead, just don't make trouble. Olga Marie crossed her arms and looked at Gadotsi with disdain. After all, Wu Ming was still Olga Marie's follower. Even if there were doubts and distrust between the two sides, Olga Marie was relieved that they could talk like this. It's good to be motivated, but usually such a team of heroes will be wiped out in the end. Stheno smiled and looked at Gadotsi and the others. Stheno and Uraili didn't speak before because they knew how to read people's expressions. As for Anna and Sakura Madu, they were the kind of people who didn't talk much. Now that everyone had left the oppressive atmosphere, Stheno couldn't help but mock them. The goddess who has lost her ability to fight should take care of herself. Olga Marie was indeed arrogant and dared to confront the goddess. As director, she's a goddess. Please be a little more polite. Gadotsi whispered in Olga Marie's ear. Miss Stheno too, please calm down. Matthew also tried to calm them down. Seeing how energetic they were, Wu Ming also calmed down. Wu Ming didn't think that Rafe Lionel Floros was a fake. Wu Ming said that someone might be pretending to be Rafe because he wanted to take care of his temporary master's feelings. Rafe's tone, when he introduced himself, didn't sound like an imposter at all. Wu Ming used his omnipotent senses to confirm that this was the real Rafe and not an imposter. After all, sometimes mentality and momentum were the key to victory. So, it's time to answer my question. Wu Ming suddenly asked. Everyone just remembered that the two sides were supposed to exchange information. That's true. Then, I, who interrogated your master, will tell you. Olga Marie stood up. Chapter 349. Olga Marie briefly explained their situation to Wu Ming. They came from a research organization called Chaldea in the future. Its full name was Finest Chaldea, or Chaldea for short. In 2015, Chaldea detected that human beings would go extinct in 2016, so they began to study the cause of human extinction. Later, Chaldea's people found a singularity in history under the detection of the near-future observation lens, SHIBA. To put it simply, singularities were cancer cells that were formed from irregular history within the regular history. It was a cancer that could endanger the entire history of human beings. This singularity was where Wu Ming and the others were, the unrecorded winter with City Holy Grail War in 2004. They determined that this singularity was the cancer that would make human beings go extinct in 2016. Therefore, they used Chaldea's device that could send masters through time and space, and prepared to send 48 magicians with ray shift adaptability and master performance to this era to solve this singularity. However, for unknown reasons, when the 47 masters were preparing to be sent, Chaldea was hit by an explosion. Most of the facilities were damaged, and the survivors were less than 20 people except for the 47 frozen masters. The reason why 47 people were frozen was because Gadatsi, the master, dozed off during a meeting and was kicked out by Olga Marie. It had to be said that Gadatsi was really lucky. Then, when Gadatsi wanted to save Matthew, she was trapped in the central control room. Originally a human, Matthew was summoned by Chaldea and bestowed with power when he was on the verge of death. Then the race shift automatically selected masters, and Gadatsi and her servant, Matthew, were brought to this world. As for the rest, Wuming knew most of it, so Wuming stopped Olga Marie, who still wanted to continue speaking. I understand the general situation. In short, you need to solve this singularity and let history return to the right path, right? Yes, that's true, but what's the matter with your easy voice? Said Olga Marie crossly. After all, the city had summoned 14 servants, and it was very dangerous. My mission is also to protect this world from calamity. Although I'm still an assassin, I'm not that strong, but if there's a chance, I'll change my class. What? Olga Marie, Roman, Gadatsi, and the others were shocked. Even Stheno, Urieli, and the others were shocked. The reason why servants were servants was because their spirit base was fixed and they couldn't change their class. However, Wuming actually said that he wanted to change his class, which undoubtedly surprised everyone. Well, after all, I'm special. Wuming smiled. But aren't you breaking the rules? Changing your class and rank. Roman began to mutter. That's only if there's a chance. It's not that easy to change your class. Wuming shrugged. In short, let's leave here first. If we stay in the same place for a long time, it's inevitable that other servants will come to find us. Everyone nodded in agreement. After that, Roman said that if they needed help, they could contact him and then turned off the communication. After all, Chaldea still needed him. Then, Wuming, Olga Marie, Gadatsi, Matthew, Stheno, Urieli, Anna, and Sakura Madu formed a small team and embarked on the path to defeat the great demon king. Soon, Wuming and the others arrived at the villa where Wuming and Gilgamesh lived. The reason why they came here was because of Stheno's words. The other side has a servant that can kill a god. Are you sure you want to go directly to Yuanzong Mountain? Although Olga Marie and the others had already chosen Yuanzong Mountain as their target, because of Stheno's words, everyone had to follow Wuming. And also because of Wuming's words. I have a super first-class servant with me. In this way, Olga Marie and the others followed Wuming to the villa. In the small villa, Wuming skillfully prepared tea for everyone, and then casually sat down as if it was his own home. It seems that she's not at home. Wuming didn't find Gilgamesh in the house. Thinking about it, Gilgamesh wasn't a person who would stay idle. Perhaps she left after discovering the change. But he didn't rule out the possibility that she went to find him. With the idea of a short rest, Wuming didn't rush to leave with everyone. Gorgon's 3 sisters didn't feel uncomfortable. After all, the 3 of them were goddesses. Sakura Madu was too young to care, and Gadatsi and the others were sitting on the sofa with a slightly strange expression. What's wrong? Wuming naturally saw their doubts, so he directly asked, Is this the house of Assassin's previous master? Matthew asked. Gadatsi and Olga Marie also nodded. After all, Wuming's move was too skillful. It felt like he was the owner of this house. If it was their master's house, it would make sense. No, this house was bought in my name, and I originally didn't have a master. Wuming calmly took a sip of tea and then said, Hey. Gadatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie immediately yelled. I forgot to tell you this. I came here on my own initiative. If I have to say, my master should be the great Holy Grail. Wuming calmly took another sip of tea and slowly said, Wait a minute, what's going on? Olga Marie slammed the cup on the table and looked at Wuming like she was looking at an animal. The sound of the teacup being put down scared Gadatsi and Matthew. If the teacup wasn't sturdy enough, the boiling hot tea would have spilled onto Olga Marie's hand. Although I know your identity is not ordinary and can change your class, but can you still show up on your own accord? Wuming calmly took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. He then looked at Olga Marie without any emotion. Ah, that's right. Sorry, my identity is not ordinary, so I can do whatever I want. Director, calm down. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. Then Olga Marie angrily sat on the sofa and then grumbled by herself. She kept muttering, "How can you cheat like this? It's really against the rules. By the way, is the companion that assassin mentioned not here?" Matthew awkwardly smiled and began to change the topic to discuss the purpose of everyone here. "Ah, she probably left here to find me." Wuming smiled. "Don't worry, it can be said that no one can kill her. Of course, if her stubbornness flares up, the result might be different." Thinking that if Gilgamesh was angered, it meant that he had lost half the battle, especially with Lancer, who had the power to kill gods. If Gilgamesh fought him head-on, he would be at a disadvantage. Let's take a break here. After all, if we plan for the worst, we should still have 6 enemies. Wuming looked at everyone seriously. Chapter 350. Whoosh! Wuming pulled out a moving blackboard and began to explain the power of both sides. In order to distinguish the 7 servants in my group and the 7 servants summoned by the enemy, now use N and O as the distinguishing words. Wuming took out a pointer and knocked on the blackboard. "New and old, it feels so perfunctory," someone complained. "Then use black and red." Hearing someone complaining, Wuming knocked on the blackboard again and changed his mind. "Now, let's talk about the situation." Wuming coughed and began his speech. "According to Stheno, the new 7 servants defeated the Black Berserker at the beginning, and I defeated the Red Berserker just now. The Berserkers on both sides have already left. Although Hercules had 12 trials in the face of 7 servants, and all of them were not weak, naturally, he could not survive. And the Black Archer, well, I am familiar with him, so he's an ally." Wuming was still thinking about whether to tell them that he was the master of the archer. After all, Wuming's hands had been wearing gloves. Gadotsi and others did not find the command seal. After thinking about it, Wuming decided not to tell them. In fact, it was just Wuming's bad taste, and I know the Blackcaster. In the current situation, he will definitely choose to help us. Not counting him, I, Black Archer, Red Assassin Stheno, and Red Archer Riley, and Black Lancer Anna and Matthew. We already have 6 servants. Wuming pointed out the advantages of his side, but the enemy's lineup is not weak. Wuming began to point out the weaknesses. First of all, the Black Saber is the famous King Arthur. I don't know the real name of the rider, but the other side has the existence of the undead core. As soon as Wuming finished speaking, Olga, Marie, and the others looked worried. King Arthur, undead core. Both of these were very troublesome. Then there's the red team. We don't know the Red Saber's real name. We only know that he's a wretched man. However, to be able to hold the position of Saber, he's definitely not a simple person, Wuming said. Everyone nodded. As for Lancer, I think he's the most difficult to deal with right now. According to Stheno's description, Lancer is very likely to be the great hero of India, Karna, Wuming said calmly. Karna, Matthew, and Olga Marie were shocked. So that's how it is. No wonder it gave me such a dangerous feeling, Stheno said. If it's the hero who's doing charity, it's indeed very disadvantageous for us, Urieli added. What? Who is Karna? After all, Gadotsi had been an ordinary person before. She didn't know about Hindu mythology, so it was normal that she didn't know about Karna. He's known as the hero who's doing charity. He's a hero in one of the 2 great epics of India, the Mahabharata. He's said to be the son of the sun god Surya, the hero bestowed by the heavens, and the strongest enemy of Arjuna, Olga Marie explained. In the Mahabharata, Karna has a golden armor that's connected to his skin. It was given to him by his father, the sun god Surya, to protect himself. It's basically invulnerable, Wuming explained. But his strongest weapon is the god-killing spear that he gave up the golden armor, Matthew said solemnly. God-killing spear? Indra tricked Karna into giving him the golden armor. Out of guilt, he gave Karna the lightning spear that can kill gods. It's undoubtedly a weapon against gods. At full power, no god can defend against it, Wuming said nostalgically. Wuming had fought Karna before and won. However, There was no doubt that Wu Ming cheated. He was temporarily given the evil, noble phantasm by the suppression force. He locked Karna as evil and took advantage of the opportunity to hurt Karna, who had lost his golden armor. If Wu Ming had fought Karna with Sodlek saber rank, there was no doubt that Wu Ming would have lost. No matter how much Wu Ming disguised himself as Sodlek, Sodlek was still a human general after all. The mystery was different, and he was crushed by Karna. Wu Ming shook his head to stop thinking about it. Especially the servants with divinity. Once Karna releases his noble phantasm, he'll most likely die. Wu Ming's words hit everyone's heart quite hard. What's more, Karna is a brave warrior. His martial arts have reached the peak. Ordinary servants will soon be defeated if they fight against him. Wu Ming looked at everyone and said earnestly, "At least you guys have no chance of winning." This sentence made Matthew and Anna lower their heads. That's right. One of them was a demi-servant, and the other was an immature child. It was indeed difficult for them to fight against Karna, who could kill gods. However, Stheno and Euryale didn't feel depressed. "You're talking about us, not you, right?" Euryale smiled. Hearing Euryale's words, Matthew and Anna raised their heads and looked at Wu Ming. This made Wu Ming feel helpless. "I once met Karna with a different rank, and I was lucky enough to defeat him." This surprised everyone, especially Gadatsi. "That's amazing, Mr. Assassin, but that's when I was in a different rank. If I were to fight Karna with my current assassin rank, I would definitely die." Wu Ming shook his head. "But you could change your rank, right?" "Then change your rank," Olga Marie said casually. The others also looked at Wu Ming in agreement. "I also said that there are conditions to change a rank. It just so happens that I don't meet the conditions at the moment." Wu Ming waved his hand helplessly. "Then, how can we win this hero over? From the Mahabharata, we can see that he is a righteous man." Olga Marie thought for a moment and said quickly, "Impossible." Wu Ming directly denied Olga Marie's words. "Why?" Olga Marie slammed the table unconvinced. "I fought with Karna, and in that battle, I learned about Karna's character." Wu Ming poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip. "He is a servant who completely obeys the master's words. He completely wants to turn himself into a weapon, even though the servant is the master's weapon," Wu Ming said, a little bored. "Oh, then we're definitely going to lose," Gadatsi said, a little depressed. "Senpai." Matthew wanted to comfort Gadatsi, but he didn't know what to say. After all, the enemy was too strong, and they couldn't win him over. "That's why I brought you here, isn't it?" Wu Ming smiled. "Huh?" Chapter 351. "Do you mean that your companion here, the servant, can help us deal with Karna?" Olga Marie was indeed one of the 12 monarchs. Although she was still young, her mind worked quickly. Yes, if she's steady, she can be said to be invincible. Wu Ming smiled slightly. "Then, assassin, can you tell us her real name?" Gadatsi asked curiously. Wait a minute, senpai. It's rude to ask for her real name as soon as we meet," Matthew said nervously. After all, the real name was the secret of every servant. Many times, the weakness of a servant could be known through the real name. Is it that serious?" Gadatsi touched her head. After all, Gadatsi didn't understand these rules, so Wu Ming certainly wouldn't be angry. "Don't worry. Just knowing her real name won't affect her." Wu Ming smiled. "The ancient king, the hero king, Gilgamesh. That's her name." After Wu Ming said this, Olga Marie, Matthew, Stheno, and the others gasped. "The hero king, Gilgamesh?" Gadatsi asked in confusion. "The ancient king who collected almost all the treasures in the world and cut off the connection between gods and humans. That's already the highest level of heroic spirit," Olga Marie said. "I didn't expect that person to be attracted by the Holy Grail War." "How ironic," Stheno said. Wu Ming knew what Stheno was talking about. The ancient king, who had almost all the treasures in the world and supreme power, was reduced to a servant and participated in the dirty magician ceremony. The Holy Grail War was a dirty ceremony, a war that was triggered by the selfishness of magicians using the weapons called servants. War was dirty. Whether it was in the name of righteousness or something else, the essence of war would never change. This was also why Joan of Arc felt that her hands were dirty. Even if the French army was the righteous side in the war between England and France, and even if Joan of Arc had been holding the holy flag on the battlefield and did not kill anyone, she still participated in the war. Because of her filth, she did not refuse the trial, did not argue for herself, and did not feel that it was unfair. She calmly accepted the burning at the stake. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about Joan of Arc. In short, the hero king, Gilgamesh, is definitely on our side. The direction is good. After Wuming finished speaking, everyone's heart sank. Although they hadn't seen that king, they were sure that he was very reliable. For now, let's stay here for one night. Let's not talk about Olga Marie. Tachika must be very tired. Gadotsi smiled embarrassedly when he heard himself being mentioned. I'm a little tired, senpai. Take good care of your body. Matthew said with concern. Ha ha, I know, Matthew. Gadotsi responded to Matthew and smiled happily. However, Wuming always felt that she was full of emotions. Wait a minute, why exclude me? I'm also very tired. Olga Marie said rather angrily. Well, you're my master. How can you be tired so quickly? Be strong. Wuming teased Olga Marie. Damn it, assassin, you bastard. Olga Marie felt that her brain must be abnormal to sign a contract with this guy in front of her. Ha ha, Wuming laughed and disappeared in spirit form. I'll go out and investigate the situation first. As for food, there are ingredients in the kitchen refrigerator. You can make it yourself. You can also familiarize yourself with this house and choose a room for yourself. Well, that's it. After that, Wuming's aura completely disappeared. Then, forgive me for being rude, Stheno said and stood up. Huh, is the goddess going somewhere? Gadotsi asked in confusion. Of course, to her room. The goddess needs to rest, Euryale replied and stood up with Stheno. Master needs to rest. With that, Anna picked up the quiet Sakura Madu and followed her two sisters. Thank you. When they passed by Gadotsi, Anna's voice came softly. This voice made Gadotsi laugh. What? Aren't you being quite frank? After the three Gorgon sisters left, Olga Marie spoke. Seriously, they're all so willful. Olga Marie complained as she sat on the sofa and angrily drank tea. I feel like the director and assassin are very compatible, Gadotsi suddenly said as she looked at the complaining Olga Marie. What do you mean? I don't want that guy to be compatible. Seriously? Olga Marie glanced at Gadotsi and said calmly. Olga Marie's anger had almost subsided. After all, she got used to being angry. I'll go see what ingredients we have in the fridge. Matthew stood up and bowed to the two before walking to the kitchen. What's wrong with Matthew? Gadotsi asked after Matthew left. You noticed it too? Olga Marie crossed her arms and looked in the direction Matthew left. Yeah, Matthew is giving people the feeling that he has something on his mind. Gadotsi finished and stood up. I'll go take a look. With that, Gadotsi left. Yeah, after all, you're Matthew's master, Olga Marie said calmly as she watched Gadotsi leave. Really? When will my servant care about me? Olga Marie couldn't help but think of the only servant who was willing to contract with her, and the only one who could contract with her. In the kitchen, Matthew began to check the appliances after he found the kitchen. The gas furnace is normal. The electricity and drinking water are still there. That's great, Matthew said happily. After all, if the electricity and water were cut off, it would be terrible. Matthew. Suddenly, Gadotsi's voice came from behind Matthew. Hey, senpai, why are you here? Matthew turned around and looked at Gadotsi, who came in. Because I'm a little worried, so I came to see you. Gadotsi smiled. Foo, foo. At this moment, an unknown white creature that looked like a squirrel, cat, or dog appeared at the entrance of the kitchen while making a foo sound. It's Fufu. Matthew shouted in surprise. Foo, the little guy called Fufu called out and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder. Fufu's wine glass disappeared when we were running away from Stheno and Euryale. I didn't expect it to find us. Gadotsi was surprised. Of course, senpai. Fufu is very intelligent. Matthew smiled and stroked Fufu while talking to Gadotsi. Fufu, on the other hand, looked very obedient. If Wuming was here, he would be surprised. Chapter 352. It's incredible, Senpai. Fufu only appeared in front of the two of us. Matthew smiled. Maybe it's a coincidence. Gadatsi shrugged her shoulders. He didn't think about foes matter anymore, and Gadatsi told him the purpose of his visit. By the way, Matthew, what are you worried about? Gadatsi's words made Matthew fall into silence. Actually, Senpai, I can't release my noble phantasm, and I don't know the real name of the servant that I possess. Matthew said softly. Is it important that you can't release your noble phantasm and don't know the real name? Matthew is Matthew, and that won't change. Gadatsi instantly held Matthew's hand. Gadatsi, who followed Wuming, Olga, Marie, and the others, already knew the importance of noble phantasm. However, Gadatsi didn't think that Matthew was embarrassed because he couldn't release his noble phantasm. However, Matthew still looked very uncomfortable. I know, with Assassin Senpai, your safety won't be threatened, Matthew said little by little. That's not it, Gadatsi instantly interrupted. Matthew looked at Gadatsi with a stunned expression on his face. Assassin is very strong and reliable, but Assassin is the leader's servant, and the only servant that can protect me is you, Matthew Gillett. Gadatsi grabbed Matthew's shoulders with both hands and looked straight into Matthew's clear eyes. Fufu, who was originally on Matthew's shoulder, had already jumped away. Senpai, Matthew looked at Gadatsi with a somewhat helpless expression, and then he was touched. Since we can't release the relic, we'll ask for Assassin's help when he comes back. I'm sure Assassin will have a solution, Gadatsi encouraged Matthew. But the servant's real name? Why don't we ask Assassin later? Maybe he will know. Gadatsi laughed awkwardly. Really? You need someone else to confirm your servant's true name. Suddenly, Olga Marie's voice sounded. Gadatsi and Matthew turned around and saw Olga Marie at the kitchen door. Really, it's not easy to find a kitchen, Olga Marie complained casually. After all, our house was considered a small villa, and the structure was quite unique. Matthew and Gadatsi were lucky to be able to find them so easily. Sigh. Director, why are you here? Gadatsi's expression changed from embarrassment to confusion. Of course, I don't trust you to buy two. After all, there are only two of you in Chaldea. Olga Marie said impatiently. That doesn't Assassin count? Matthew raised a small hand and asked like a student. After all, Assassin is a servant with a special identity. Not to mention that he can't follow me back to Chaldea with Assassin's identity. I don't think the small Chaldea can tolerate him. First, he could summon by himself, and now he could change his class. No matter how you think about it, Wuming was a guy with a super mysterious identity. How could Chaldea tolerate such a hero with a special mission? Moreover, the master can see the attribute value of his servant. In short, because you are too weak, you can't see Matthew's real name. Olga Marie said as she stretched out her hand to Gadatsi and pulled Gadatsi's cheek. It hurts. It hurts. Director, please be gentle. Gadatsi complained incoherently. Humph. In short, as long as you become stronger, you can see Matthew's ability value and his real name. Work hard. Olga Marie snorted and loosened her hand that pulled Gadatsi's cheek. Yes, I know. Gadatsi's eyes were filled with tears as he rubbed his cheeks. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Then, Gadatsi seemed to remember something, so she asked Olga Marie, By the way, Director, do you know Assassin's real name? Gadatsi asked curiously. I'm also very curious about Assassin's real name. Mashu also looked at Olga Marie with a curious look. You two are so annoying. Hurry up and cook for me. Then, with Olga Marie's yelling, Matthew and Gadatsi began to busy themselves in the kitchen. How can I see something like a real name? I don't have master qualifications. If he didn't have such a cheating method, I wouldn't be his master. Olga Marie said lightly while looking at Matthew and Gadatsi busy in the kitchen. And I'm also a fake master. After Matthew and Gadatsi made some simple dishes, Wuming came back. However, Wuming returned with a rather disheveled big blue dog. A big blue dog? Gadatsi said doubtfully. That's a servant. A servant. Can't you see it? Olga Marie refuted Gadatsi's words. Really, a servant in front of you can't even detect it, and it's not even an assassin. Olga Marie couldn't help but think. Yo, ladies, the big blue dog greeted Gadatsi and others frivolously. Bang! Wu Ming gave him an elbow hit in an instant. A dash. Hey, I'm injured. Listening to his complaints, Wu Ming glanced at him with disgust. You almost left, so behave yourself, Cuculin. That's right, the big blue dog was Cuculin who caught Fergus's noble phantasm neon sword. After Wu Ming finished, he threw Cuculin on the sofa. Ha ha, but I have to say hello when I see the ladies. Cuculin was a little hurt, but he still looked frivolous. Cuculin? Is that the hero of the Long March of the Bulls? Sure enough, he looks like a playboy. Olga Marie looked at Cuculin's frivolous appearance and said awkwardly, He's the caster I said would help us, but now it seems that this guy can't even protect himself. Wu Ming spread out his hands. What happened? Gadatsi asked. This guy caught Fergus' noble phantasm. I didn't expect him to survive. Wu Ming held back his laughter and explained to everyone. Fergus? He's Cuculin's adoptive father and friend. Olga Marie was relieved. The neon sword you mentioned, is it the magic sword that can cut off 3 mountains? Yes, that's the sword. The identity of the red saber has been confirmed. It's that old rogue. Wu Ming said with a slightly angry expression. It seems that Assassin and Fergus must have experienced something. Gadatsi and others thought so. Haha, it's just that Fergus flirted with Maeve. You still hold a grudge? Cuculin suddenly laughed. Chapter 353. Because Wu Ming used to work for Maeve, he was on the side of Connaught. After the war with Ulster, he ran over and said that he wanted to work for Maeve. Because of Fergus' frivolous words, Wu Ming threw him out. Of course, the process took a lot of effort. After all, Maeve was someone that Wu Ming recognized as his sister. Even if Maeve wanted to fall in love and get married, Wu Ming would never allow an old rogue like Fergus to come. Not to mention that Maeve did not have such thoughts. Maeve, who was obsessed with Wu Ming, did not get married until she died. Instead, she played with men and let them die one by one under her pomegranate skirt. Moreover, they died before they could take advantage of her. Of course, Wu Ming also contributed to this. As a warrior who protected his sister's chastity, Wu Ming naturally shot those who wanted to use force. You said that you didn't want to marry Maeve, and you didn't let her find another man. You even made our 2 countries go to war. I really don't know what you were thinking. Cuculin complained about Wu Ming helplessly. She was already throwing herself at you. Why didn't you want her? It's fine if you don't want her. Don't get in the way of others. Don't get us involved. Back then, for some reasons, Wu Ming had been protecting Maeve. But after all, Wu Ming was a traveler and had no plans to stay in any place. Then, in order to prevent Wu Ming from leaving, Maeve started the war between Connaught and Ulster. I don't have a choice either. Wu Ming rubbed his forehead. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this. It's all in the past anyway. Cuculin, who hated Maeve, began to change the topic. With the identity of an enemy established, they have an advantage in launching a general attack on us, Wu Ming said. How did you escape? Wu Ming asked Cuculin. Cuculin was not the kind of guy who would throw his life away, even if he knew that he could not win. Come to think of it, it seemed to be true. Cough, cough. Speaking of which, Fergus wouldn't say, I'm going to use my noble phantasm, and so on to let Cuculin escape. Fergus must have judged that Cuculin could not escape, so he released his noble phantasm. Logically speaking, Cuculin should have left. However, Cuculin, who was covered in wounds, smiled. Don't underestimate the Lune Rune, brother. Cuculin smiled. Even so, Cuculin was seriously injured. As the prototype of the holy sword, the demon's sword, I was careless. Wu Ming smiled. The Lune Rune was something that the Norse main god, Odin, had sacrificed an eye in exchange for. How could it be weak? Wu Ming had never used the Lune Rune in battle, so he had neglected the power of the Lune Rune. You're the first disciple of the Master. If the Master knew, you would be finished. Cuculin laughed at Wu Ming. You'd better behave yourself. Who knows when you'll disappear, Wu Ming said. He disappeared in an instant and appeared in front of Cuculin. Once again, he gave Cuculin an elbow strike. I said I was injured. Cuculin rubbed his wound again and complained loudly. So, do you need to make a contract with this master? Wuming said, pointing to Gadatsi. After Cuculin's explanation, his master disappeared in an instant, leaving nothing behind. Wuming guessed that the other black followers were the same. Although the black followers in Winterwood City had lost their master, because of the mutation of the Holy Grail, the black followers without a master could still ensure that they would not be sent back to the Hall of Valhalla through the connection of the Holy Grail. But Fergus's magic sword was not so easy to block, and Cuculin barely survived by relying on the power of the Lune Rune. Hey, Gadatsi saw Wuming pointing at her, and she was a little overwhelmed. That, if Mr. Cuculin is willing, Gadatsi said shyly. Oh, it's a young master. Of course, I am willing. Cuculin was instantly excited when he saw that his master was a young girl. Boom! It was the sound of a huge object falling to the ground. Mr. Cuculin, please respect yourself. Matthew stood beside Gadatsi, slammed his huge shield to the ground, and then looked at Cuculin seriously. Fortunately, Matthew did not use too much strength, or the floor would have to be changed again. Wuming thought. Yes, I am very honest. Cuculin said. Wait a minute. Olga Marie walked in front of Wuming and Cuculin. What's the matter with you two? Olga Marie roared. Olga Marie's understanding of Cuculin had been refreshing since he came in. After all, the conversation between Cuculin and Wuming was very clear. Your real identity is a warrior of Connaught, the silver dragon Sira, who is as famous as Cuculin. Olga Marie looked at Wuming's eyes. Sira? Gadatsi looked at Matthew in confusion. That, senior, it's like this. Matthew took Gadatsi's hand, quietly went to the side, and told Gadatsi about Sira in history. Oh, senior brother, you haven't told him your real name yet. Cuculin, who was sitting on the side, said gloatingly. After all, I'm not Sira now, just a man-killer fiend. Wuming helplessly spread out his hands. Assassin. Jack, is your real name Jack the Ripper? After hearing Wuming's words, Olga Marie guessed Wuming's real name. Fog, London, black clothes and hat, being able to call himself Jack, a pair of female noble phantoms. Olga Marie judged our real name from all this information. Man-killer fiend? Are you kidding me? How could you be a man-killer fiend? Cuculin frowned and asked in confusion. Wuming's senior brother, a great hero, turned into a man-killer fiend, which really damaged his image. Well, this is for the vengeful spirits of those children. I replaced them and became Jack the Ripper. Wuming smiled indifferently. Replaced the vengeful spirits, became Jack the Ripper. Olga Marie carefully thought about Wuming's words, savoring the meaning. However, Cuculin didn't understand at once. So that's how it is. As expected of you, it seems that you have experienced a lot in the future. Through Wuming's words, Cuculin immediately guessed why his senior brother became Assassin Jack the Ripper. It was nothing more than absorbing Jack the Ripper's spiritual base, freeing the vengeful spirits that were originally trapped, and becoming Jack the Ripper himself. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then, Wuming looked at Olga Marie. Sorry, Master. At first I wanted to hide my real name, but later I realized that you might not like this identity, so I always wanted to hide it. One idiot, Olga Marie said softly. Olga Marie raised her head and looked into Wuming's eyes. You listen to me. You are my follower. No matter what, I won't mind. Looking at Olga Marie's determined eyes, Wuming smiled. What? A frank Olga is not bad. Chapter 354. Then, Wuming was scolded by the arrogant Olga Marie again. Wuming didn't care. After all, he was arrogant. Later, Cuculin and Gadatsi concluded a servant contract. Originally, Cuculin wanted to conclude a temporary servant contract, but because it was not conducive to physical recovery, Wuming forcibly changed Cuculin's mind and concluded a formal contract with Gadatsi. My body has gradually begun to recover. I didn't expect the little girl to have such excellent qualifications as a master. Cuculin felt his physical condition and couldn't help but look at Gadatsi. Of course, this was not a flirtatious look, but a surprise at Gadatsi's potential as a master. Don't underestimate Tachika. She has excellent master qualifications. Patting Cuculin on the shoulder, Wuming smiled. Olga Marie was a little jealous at this time. After all, her master contract with Wuming was a half-finished product that Wuming cheated. However, I still want to be my master. Wuming, who noticed Olga Marie's expression, continued. This made Olga Marie blush again, and Olga Marie glared at Wuming angrily. However, Olga Marie looked very much like an angry kitten. That the food is getting cold, let's eat first. In order to avoid embarrassment, Matthew took the lead in changing the topic. Gadatsi and Matthew had already finished cooking and brought the food to the table. Now, they could enjoy it directly. Suddenly, Goudazi let out a loud cry. By the way, Mr. Assassin, there's one more thing I have to trouble you with. Although Cuculin's previous recklessness made everyone know Wuming's other identity, the Connaught Silver Dragon Wuming, Wuming still asked everyone to call him Assassin or Jack. After all, he now came with this identity. Is there anything else, Tachika? Wuming asked gently, which made Gadatsi blush. After all, Wuming was really handsome in a black leather jacket and a black top hat. That, can you tell Matthew's real name? Or her noble phantasm's real name is fine. Gadatsi knew that her request was a bit difficult, but she still put her hands together and begged Wuming. Tachika, didn't I say, as long as you become stronger, what? Noble phantasm is an instinct. Olga Marie was about to say something, but Cuculin instantly interrupted her. Marie suppressed her anger. She looked at Cuculin's eyes and didn't say anything. Instinct? Mashu pondered over Cuculin's words. Ah, yes, it's instinct. Cuculin spread out his hands. Servant and noble phantasm. These two exist together and are not separated from each other. If you haven't been able to release your noble phantasm, it's probably because your instinct hasn't been activated. With that, Cuculin looked at Gadatsi, revealing a dangerous look, and at the same time, emitting a murderous aura. Gadatsi was a little puzzled, but Matthew and Olga Marie instantly understood what Cuculin meant. Mashu quickly raised her shield and stood in front of Goudazi, while Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a scrutinizing look. Tachika is now your master. Don't think about doing anything dangerous. After all, even if Cuculin was someone Wuming knew, there was no guarantee that he wouldn't do something to hurt them. After all, Olga Marie was a magician, so it was normal for her to have such thoughts. Okay, Cuculin, don't tease them anymore, Wuming said. Well, I'm just livening up the atmosphere. Cuculin smiled and waved his hand, dispelling the murderous aura. Then, I'll leave the noble phantasm and the real name to you. I'm gonna rest, brother. After saying goodbye to Wuming, Cuculin's spiritual form disappeared. Wuming shook his head helplessly at Cuculin's character. Don't mind him, he's just like that, Wuming said to Gadatsi and the others. Immediately, Matthew also put down his shield and retreated to Gadatsi's side. So, can you let Matthew use his noble phantasm? Olga Marie asked, sitting on the sofa with her arms crossed in front of her chest and her legs crossed. Let's not talk about this in a hurry. Let me ask you, Matthew, did the servant who lent you his power tell you his real name? Wuming looked at Matthew. No. Matthew was stunned, then shook his head. Really? What was the servant who gave you power thinking? He didn't even tell you his real name and noble phantasm. It's really a headache. Olga Marie covered her head. Generally speaking, a servant's noble phantasm was related to their own life experience. Matthew didn't know the real name of the noble phantasm, so it was normal that he didn't know what the servant was. Wuming smiled. Then Wuming continued to ask, So, when you saw Berserker Lancelot, did you have any reaction? Although Matthew didn't understand Wuming's intention, he still thought about it. When I saw him, I didn't feel anything, but when I knew he was Lancelot, the Knight of the Lake, I was a little angry. Matthew, why are you angry? Gadatsi was a little puzzled. I don't know. Wuming shook his head. So, you mean that the heroic spirit who gave Matthew power has a special relationship with Lancelot? Olga Marie was a first-class magician, and she immediately guessed Wuming's intention. That's right. Wuming nodded. The reason why he asked Matthew this question was because Wu Ming knew the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power from the beginning. The most noble of the knights of the Round Table, the Knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, the Knight of the Holy Grail. That was the real name of the servant who gave Matthew power. For a long time, Matthew had addressed Wu Ming and Gadotsi as seniors, but he didn't use the term senior to address others. He addressed Gadotsi as a senior because the two of them formed a bond in Chaldea, and others addressed Wu Ming as senior by Matthew, meaning that Wu Ming was senior Wu Ming. But in fact, Galahad was the only one who addressed Wu Ming as senior back in Camelot. Because Lancelot admired Wu Ming the most, he told his son Galahad to be particularly polite to Wu Ming. But Wu Ming didn't like the word lord, so Galahad addressed Wu Ming as senior. Although that was one of the reasons, Wu Ming recognized that the power Matthew used was Galahad's because of the shield. The shield was basically the same as the shield that Artoria held during the Round Table Conference, but the details and size were different. Even Bedivere couldn't bear the burden of the Round Table. Only Galahad could. The purest and noblest knight of the Holy Grail, Galahad, only he could bear the burden of the Round Table. The servant who gave you the power to survive from the brink of death and gave you the power to protect Tachika is named Galahad. Chapter 355. Galahad. Matthew put one hand on his chest and whispered the name softly. Thank you, Assassin Senpai. Matthew bowed to Wu Ming happily to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Matthew. Even without me, you would have known Galahad's real name sooner or later. Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. Then, Wu Ming gave Matthew a dodgy. And don't be happy too early. Although I know Galahad's real name, I don't know the real name of his noble phantasm. Why? Gadotsi was puzzled. After all, noble phantasms are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Although there are many physical weapons in noble phantasms, most of them are obtained after becoming a heroic spirit. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi and explained to her. For example, the noble phantasms of Cuculin, Fergus, and the others were with them when they were alive. Generally speaking, this kind of noble phantasm was the name of the weapon itself. So knowing the name of the weapon would mean knowing the real name of the noble phantasm. However, there were many noble phantasms that had never been seen before in history. The most classic example was the treasured artifact that betrayed the witch Demetrius, Rule Breaker Talisman, Rule Breaker. It was the embodiment of the traitor witch's life, just like her entire life. The Rule Breaker Talisman was also full of betrayal. Although the noble phantasm itself was not as powerful as the knife, it had the ability to nullify all magic. It could completely nullify contracts based on magic, or life forms born with magic. Needless to say, this kind of noble phantasm was much more powerful than the Gay Balg, which was a weapon with a physical body. Galahad's noble phantasm appeared after becoming a heroic spirit, so I don't know. Wu Ming finished his explanation. Aren't you special? How can you not see through the noble phantasm of a servant? Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming with some dissatisfaction. Then I'm really sorry. I don't know about this kind of relic that only exists after it has been upgraded. Wu Ming shrugged indifferently. That's a pity. Gadotsi said regretfully. It's okay, senpai. At least I already know that the servant who gave me power and my benefactor is Galahad. Matthew comforted Gadotsi with a smile on his face. Well, you're right. I've already completed half of it. When I become stronger in the future, I'll be able to find out about Galahad's noble phantasm. Gadotsi said excitedly. At this moment, Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming. You can't get Matthew to use the relic? Wu Ming smiled at Olga Marie's question. I didn't say that I couldn't let Matthew use the relic. I just didn't know the real name of the relic. But, how can you use the relic without knowing its real name? Gadotsi was completely confused. She tilted her head and looked at Wu Ming with Matthew. Olga Marie, on the other hand, was frowning. Even she couldn't figure out how to use the relic without knowing its real name. Looking at the puzzled crowd, Wu Ming began to explain about the relic. After the death of various characters, according to their life experience, they were upgraded and also obtained a trump card called the Relic. The Relic is the trump card of every hero, and to release this trump card, you need to call out the real name of the Relic. This is indeed the case. Wuming finished, sat on the sofa, and poured himself a cup of tea. Speaking of which, Gilgamesh's tea was not ordinary. It had been so long, but the tea was still warm. Go on, Olga Marie said impatiently. Okay, don't worry. Wuming took a sip and put the teacup down. The so-called name of the Relic is actually just a form. Cuculin also said that the Relic is an instinct. Is there a limit to your instinct? If that's the case, it's not an instinct. Wuming spread out his hands. Now, for Matthew, what he lacks is not only the real name of the Relic, but also the recognition of the Relic. Only then can he unleash the power of this table shield. Wuming almost said the table, but fortunately, he changed his words in time. What did you say in the end? Gadotsi seemed to have heard something different, but she didn't hear it clearly. Ahem, don't worry about the details. At present, we need to give Matthew's shield a real name. This time, it will be easier to release it when needed. Wuming quickly changed the topic. Then, how about Assassin give Matthew a real name for the Relic? Gadotsi suggested. This shouldn't be done by me, but by you guys from Chaldea. Wuming said, looking at Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. Is it up to us? Gadotsi thought, but she didn't have a clue. Naming something. Gadotsi inexplicably felt that the world was full of malice. Then, when Mashu releases her noble phantasm, how about shouting Lord Chaldeus? Olga Marie suddenly said from aside, Lord, Calds. Matthew carefully thought about the real name of the Relic. Well, thank you, Director. Matthew sincerely looked at Olga Marie and thanked her. Olga Marie looked at Matthew's sincere smile and was a little stunned. No, it's nothing. Then Olga Marie said softly. Without a doubt, Olga Marie was proud again. Great, Matthew. Then you can release the Relic. Gadotsi hugged Matthew and said happily, but don't be happy too early. At this moment, Wu Ming retorted. After all, if you can't be recognized by the Relic and release the Relic, then the so-called Lord Chaldeas is a joke. Wu Ming looked at Matthew and Gadotsi seriously. Assassin is right. If Matthew can't release the Relic, then the real name I gave you will be wasted. You have to work hard. Olga Marie encouraged. Yes, I will work hard. Matthew nodded excitedly. You too, Tachika Fujimaru. As a master, your self-awareness is really bad. I will train you later. Olga Marie said to Gadotsi sternly. It can't be. Gadotsi's face was filled with worry. For this girl who was just an ordinary person not long ago, special training was like running a few kilometers in military training. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and eat. After eating, we will train. Olga Marie pinched Gadotsi's cheek and urged. Senior, you have to work hard. Matthew cheered her on. Yes, Gadotsi said helplessly. Wuming looked at Matthew's figure and couldn't help but think of the pure young man, Galahad. Maybe you didn't tell her your real name to train her. But with me here, your idea may not work. Galahad. Well, I will help you train her. Wuming looked out of the window. Although the sky was dark, the future was full of hope. Chapter 356. After dinner, Gadotsi was dragged by Olga Marie for special training. It was called special training, but in fact it was Olga Marie telling Gadotsi about magicians, servants, and masters. After all, even if Gadotsi stepped into the world of magicians, she was still a girl. Becoming a master meant that he might die, and Olga Marie's task was to make Gadotsi recognize all of this. She didn't want him to disappoint Mashu and be a qualified master. While Olga Marie was doing special training for Gadotsi, Wuming was also doing special training for Matthew. In the yard, Wuming and Matthew were fighting against each other. Mashu put her shield on the side of her body and was ready to fight. Wu Ming, on the other hand, wielded a silver-white longsword. That's right, it was the meteor silver. It was reasonable to say that Wu Ming's assassin class wouldn't have weapons of other classes, but Wu Ming cheated by bringing his noble phantoms, Dragonist, with him. Although this class couldn't release the meteor silver, it could still be used for hand-to-hand combat. As a shielder, you must have a defense that can resist all attacks. That shield is already very strong, so you have to start with the person holding it, Wu Ming said carefully. Matthew listened carefully to Wu Ming's words, nodding his little head from time to time. Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Wu Ming held the meteor silver and put it in front of him and said, Next, I will attack your shield. You only have one goal, and that is to hold on under my attack. Are you ready, Matthew? Wu Ming said sternly to Matthew. Yes, Senpai, I am ready. After saying that, Ma Xu placed her shield in front of her and looked at Wu Ming from the corner of her eyes. Let's go. After that, Wu Ming rushed toward Matthew. Clank! The holy sword and the holy shield collided, making a very harsh sound. Matthew blocked the attack and made a muffled sound. You can't do it, Matthew. You have to know that my strength is only C-class. You have to adapt to this impact, or your master will die, Wu Ming criticized Matthew. Yes, Senpai. Matthew responded loudly. Again. After that, Wu Ming hit Matthew's shield again. Clank, clank, clank. Silent continued to attack Ma Xu's shield, and there was a burst of harsh sound. Matthew struggled to support himself and took Wu Ming's blow after blow, making muffled sounds again and again. Matthew's legs couldn't stop shaking, and his hands couldn't stop shaking, but Matthew didn't let the shield leave his hands. Drops of sweat slid down Matthew's cheeks and fell to the ground, but Matthew was still holding on. Wu Ming looked at Matthew with relief. Gadotsi was really lucky to have such a follower in Junior. Gradually, Wu Ming's sword swung faster and faster. Matthew, who could still rest between swings, gradually had no chance to catch his breath. Clank, 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 clank. Gradually, the meteor silver in Wu Ming's hand turned into a silver-white sword light and bombarded Matthew's shield. If one looked closely, they would find that each sword light was enchanted with magic. This was an alternative version of magic discharge. Although Wu Ming didn't have this skill, because of Wu Ming's EX-level infinite magic, Wu Ming could extract the magic from his body and enchant it on the meteor silver. This was another advantage of Wu Ming. Because Wu Ming was not dead and had a powerful identity, Wu Ming had the memory of his class. For example, Cuculin, as a caster, should only have knowledge about the Lune Rune and not the spear art. However, his spear art was engraved in his bones, so even as a caster, Cuculin could still fight a few rounds with Wu Ming. Moreover, for example, Stheno and Uraili, the two of them didn't have corresponding classes at all. Because of the performance of their class, the two of them were given the ability of that class. For example, Wu Ming was now an assassin, so Jack the Ripper couldn't use magic. Therefore, Wu Ming couldn't use the magic in his mind. He could only inject magic into the runestone to detonate it. Similarly, Wu Ming couldn't use the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm because Jack the Ripper didn't have any records of using the Meteor Silver Noble Phantasm. This was also the disadvantage of being a servant. It would fix the development direction of a certain class. Once a servant was summoned in a certain class, the most convenient weapon to use would be the weapon of that class. For example, if Uraili was an archer, she would have an extra bow in her hand and would have knowledge about bows and arrows. At this moment, Matthew was enduring the high-density slashes that were infused with magic. However, although Matthew looked like he couldn't hold on any longer, Matthew was still able to hold on. Matthew, Gadotsi, who had arrived at some point, looked at Matthew, who was struggling and couldn't bear to look at him. She then turned her head away. Don't turn your head away. Olga Marie stood beside Gadotsi and stared at Wu Ming and Matthew in the courtyard. She said to Gadotsi, "Did you forget what I told you? Watch them carefully." After Olga Marie finished speaking, Gadotsi seemed to have made up her mind. She clenched her fist and looked at Matthew, who was struggling to hold on. Wu Ming, of course, noticed Gadotsi and Olga Marie's arrival. Therefore, Wu Ming gave Matthew another dose of medicine. "What's wrong, Matthew? Can't you do it? Your master is watching you." Hearing Wu Ming's words, Matthew turned his head and looked to the side. Sure enough, Gadotsi was looking at Matthew intently. Matthew read something from Gadotsi's eyes. Hold on, Matthew. I believe in you. Matthew read the sincere encouragement in Gadotsi's eyes. If I were an enemy, then I would completely defeat you and kill your master. This sentence was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Matthew's eyes suddenly shrank, as if he thought of the scene that Wuming said. He was defeated, and Gadotsi was cruelly killed. No, Senior. In an instant, Matthew roared. The magic all over his body condensed on a shield. Matthew shook the shield violently, and a white light began to appear. A strong white wall gradually emerged. Lord Chaldea's. Chapter 357. With the release of the noble phantasm, the chalk wall appeared in front of Matthew. Bang! Wuming attacked the chalk wall, but he was bounced back. Cheat! The meteor silver was inserted into the ground, and Wuming stepped on the ground to maintain his balance. The meteor silver and Wuming's legs were pushed back by the huge force, leaving 3 deep marks on the ground. I see. Is this Galahad's noble phantasm? No, it should be Matthew's noble phantasm, the pure land of Chaldea in your heart. Wuming pulled out the meteor silver and looked at the chalk wall that was as pure as Matthew's heart. Then, Wuming put away the meteor silver. Well done, Matthew. Wuming gestured to Matthew and gave him thumbs up. That's great. Matthew looked at Wuming's thumbs and said weakly. Matthew looked at Matthew's thumbs up. Then Mashu looked at Gadotsi, who was running toward her, and her vision turned black, and she fainted. Wuming instantly appeared behind Matthew and hugged the unconscious Matthew. Gadotsi ran over and looked at Matthew worriedly. You did well, Matthew. I'm proud of you. Gadotsi held the unconscious Matthew's hand and said with a smile, Really, your training is too cruel. Olga Marie walked to Wuming and looked at the unconscious Matthew and complained to Wuming. But Matthew persevered and released the noble phantasm, didn't he? Wuming looked at Matthew with relief. At least her efforts were not in vain. And now there's a strong enemy. Matthew has to do this if he wants to grow up quickly. Then, Wuming took out a runestone from his black ripples. The Lune rune on it represented healing. Placing it on Matthew, Wuming injected magic into the runestone. The runestone broke, and the pure green energy turned into light spots and merged into Matthew's body. Visible to the naked eye, Matthew's body disappeared, and even his cheeks had a trace of peace, as if he had a good dream. Athena told me that warriors can only grow in battle, but Matthew is a defensive type, so I used this method to train him. Athena, are you hiding something from us? Olga Marie crossed her arms and stared at Wuming suspiciously. Silence was in Ireland and would not have anything to do with Greece. Therefore, Olga Marie looked at Wuming suspiciously. Ahem, I'll send Matthew back to his room first. Tachika, please take care of Matthew. Wuming quickly changed the topic and then carried Matthew in his arms. As for the shield, it was naturally carried by its master. Okay. Gadotsi nodded and picked up the shield. Why is it so heavy? I thought it was light. Gadotsi's face was red as she carried the shield. Usually, Matthew could carry it easily, but she didn't expect the shield to be so heavy. Matthew is a servant. Even if he is a subservient, he is still a servant. Of course, his strength is higher than yours. Come on, Tachika, this is also part training. Wuming looked at Gadotsi with a smile, and then left first. Wait a minute. Gadotsi carried the shield, struggled to follow Wuming, and left. Really, both of them are so troublesome. Olga Marie rubbed her forehead. How many things is he hiding from me? Then, Olga Marie began to think about Wuming's secrets. Exploring a man's secrets is the first step for a woman to fall. Suddenly, Cuculin materialized. None of your business. Olga Marie proudly stared at Cuculin. Although Cuculin was rejected, he didn't get angry or retreat. Then, Cuculin moved forward and stared at Olga Marie as if he saw something interesting. The talent of a magician is first class, but he doesn't have the talent to become a master. That's interesting. It's none of your business. Olga Marie angrily pushed away Olga Marie, who was staring at her. Cuculin, who was pushed away, didn't get angry. He smiled casually and then began to talk about wombing. By the way, my brother is really resourceful. He can even make a contract with someone who doesn't have the talent to become a master. Cuculin waved his hand and said casually, "That." At this time, Olga Marie suddenly opened her mouth. Cuculin looked at Olga Marie in confusion. "Are you close to assassin?" Olga Marie asked with a slightly red face. It was a little embarrassing for a proud person to put down her attitude and ask someone else. Cuculin's eyes lit up. He had already guessed Olga Marie's thoughts. Not very close. After all, the first time we met was on the battlefield. But I heard a lot about my brother from my master. We also talk about him in our free time. After all, we are not mortal enemies. We fight all the time. If Wuming heard this, he would have hammered Cuculin's head. If Cuculin hadn't been serious, Wuming wouldn't have fought him to the death. Did you think that the spear of impaling death was so easy to receive? Besides, isn't there a saying that the one who knows you best is often your opponent? So, I know my brother quite well. Cuculin looked at Olga Marie and grinned. "What? Do you want to know my brother's privacy?" Cuculin teased Olga Marie. Olga Marie's face turned red when she heard Cuculin's teasing. Ahem. After all, he is my follower. It is necessary for me to know my follower's story. Isn't it? Olga Marie coughed and replied righteously. Isn't there a record in human history? In fact, the stories of our heroes are basically similar to what is recorded. Cuculin waved his hand. Instantly, Olga Marie looked at Cuculin with a "you're dead" look. First of all, I only know my brother's story in Ireland. Cuculin raised his hands in surrender. That's fine. Let's get started. Olga Marie thought for a moment. It was better than nothing, so she nodded. Then, Olga Marie came to the steps and sat down, waiting for Cuculin's story. Then, Cuculin looked in the direction of Wuming. After confirming that there was no Wuming around, he began to tell the story. His story is basically similar to what you know, but I have to tell you about him and Maeve. As if he thought of something, Cuculin smiled gloatingly. In the beginning, my brother was a traveler. However, he said that he was traveling around, but in fact, he just couldn't find his way. Cuculin laughed. You mean, he has no sense of direction? Olga Marie also wanted to laugh. Yes, but he was a greenhorn. Now, he shouldn't have a sense of direction. Cuculin smiled and shook his head. After that, the first place he went was Connaught, and because he accidentally saved a damsel in distress, he was entangled by Maeve. Chapter 358. In the end, Maeve's father intervened in the battle, and my brother took the opportunity to leave. After that, I never saw him again. Cuculin, who had been leaning against the wall for a long time, stopped. The story was over. Maeve really didn't get married for assassin. Olga Marie found it hard to imagine that Maeve, who was called a slut, would keep her virginity for a man. Yes, after all, Maeve was captured by Wuming as soon as she left home. Therefore, although Maeve seemed to be dissolute in the days after that, as far as I know, she has been keeping her chastity. Cuculin looked helpless, but even if senior brother were to follow Maeve, the war would still happen. There's no difference, Cuculin said in an open-minded tone. After all, Maeve was called a person with a bad character by my master. Cuculin waved his hand. Olga Marie, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look on her face as she held her chin with one hand. So that's how it is anyway. Don't get too involved with my senior. At this time, Cuculin's tone began to become serious. The iron rule of servants is that they can't interfere too much in this era. If the girl's heart is locked onto the servant, it won't be good for either of them. Cuculin was saying that they shouldn't rely on Wuming too much. Once the Holy Grail War is over, Wuming will leave here, and whether he can be summoned again is still a question. If it's just a one-sided love, it's okay, but if both of them have a deep sense of dependence on each other, it's really bad for both of them. It's like a common love between a god and a mortal, and in the end, it won't end well. Because not to mention the lifespan of the two, they're not on the same level. I'll think about it. After a moment of silence, Olga Marie answered. What a wonderful story just now. Suddenly, Wu Ming's ghostly voice came from behind Cuculin. Ah! Cuculin let out a strange cry and quickly distanced himself from us. However, a hand pulled Cuculin's collar. Yo, senior, what a coincidence. Cuculin pretended to be fine. I didn't expect you to be able to tell stories. No wonder you're a caster, Cuculin. Wu Ming smiled and looked at Cuculin. It's okay. Cuculin smiled awkwardly. After all, no matter what, he was still talking about her behind her back, so it was a little awkward. Pay attention to the situation around you. Don't let the enemy's servants take advantage of you. Wu Ming let go of Cuculin after saying that. Understood. Cuculin waved his hand at us, and his spirit form disappeared. After Cuculin disappeared, Wu Ming looked at Olga Marie. At that moment, Olga Marie had turned away, blushing. Didn't Cuculin say that it's not good to know too much about a man? Wu Ming didn't get angry, but said in a calm tone, What can I do? You're always so mysterious. It's right for me to want to know more about you. Olga Marie replied, not to be outdone, but her voice was a little weak. Olga Marie still didn't turn around, but from the way Olga Marie's ears turned red, her face must be as red as a monkey's but at that moment. However, the fate that we have formed together will not be broken. Wu Ming said inexplicably. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming in confusion. Wu Ming smiled and continued. My mission is to save this world, and your mission is to solve this singularity, isn't it? Since our goals are the same, then we are companions. Companions will definitely be able to understand each other in the future, so there's no need to rush. Companions? Olga Marie carefully thought about Wu Ming's words. But you will leave after this, won't you? How can we understand each other then? Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming. Yes, it wasn't that Wu Ming didn't have a chance. It was that Olga Marie didn't have a chance. Olga Marie's words reminded Wu Ming of the fact that Olga Marie herself was a ghost. As if he had decided on something, Wu Ming walked behind Olga Marie, turned his back, and sat down next to Olga Marie. Ah! Olga Marie felt the warmth on Wu Ming's back and screamed. What do you care? Wu Ming smiled without turning his head. Oh no, I was just startled, said Olga Marie indifferently. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. The once reliable director was now like a little girl. In that case, let's get to know each other first, my master. Wu Ming suggested in a light tone. Olga Marie was silent. Wu Ming didn't say anything either, just quietly waiting for Olga Marie to speak. You know, because of my identity, I've never had any friends since I was a child, and my only teacher died in an accident. Olga Marie spoke. Although it's not a good time to complain, we still think that Olga Marie didn't have any friends because she was arrogant. After that, I threw everything I had into magic. Fortunately, my talent was there, and I became a first-class magician and the next head of the Animus family. Olga Marie leaned on Wu Ming's back and continued. 3 years ago, my father, one of the 12 monarchs of the clock tower, the monarch of the astrology department, died. Olga Marie was a little sad. I became the new monarch of the astrology department, and then, in order to inherit my father's will, I became the new director of Chaldea. But, you know, the world of magicians is cruel. Olga Marie's eyes were a little dim. The other magician families began to target me, the young monarch, and the people in the family began to gradually disapprove of me. And in Chaldea, I was very busy because of all kinds of things. Olga Marie painfully held her head. Her body was a little stiff. Then, I met Leviticus at this point. Wu Ming could feel that Olga Marie's stiff body relaxed. Whether it was the family's disdain, the other family's suppression, or the various troubles in Chaldea, as long as Lev was there, he could help me solve them. Olga Marie thought of the dead Lev and felt a little sad. When I knew Lev was dead, I felt like the whole world was collapsing. Saying this, Wu Ming felt Olga Marie's abnormality. Her body and heart were constantly shaking, like the straw on a camel's back. But you are still the director of Chaldea, the monarch of the astrology department, Olga Marie Asmerit Animus. Chapter 359. You are one of the 12 sovereigns, the director of Chaldea. Although Lev is no longer here, You still have Tachika and Matthew, and they all care about you. Although Roman seems to be quite frivolous, I believe that he is still reliable. Wu-ming said without looking back. Perhaps this was the so-called true love is revealed in adversity. Now, there were less than 20 people left in Chaldea. These people could continue to operate Chaldea and support Gadatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's singularity exploration, not only because of their good character, strong will, but also because they cared about the three people. If they choose to give up when most of Chaldea's facilities are damaged and almost all the staff members are dead, then can you still solve the singularity smoothly? Wu-ming proposed. Let's not talk about other things first. Take the space travel technology, the collar transfer, for example. Without the help of Roman and the others, you can't return to Chaldea. Olga Marie was a little confused. She had never thought about these problems. Roman and the others' backup support, in Olga Marie's view, was reasonable. She didn't consider whether the remaining 20 people in Chaldea would go on strike. They care about you and believe that you will be able to solve this singularity. How about you? How should you shoulder the responsibility of a director? Do you have hope in your heart, or do you have despair in your heart? Wu-ming's series of questions made Olga Marie a little sluggish, and she couldn't respond for a while. Besides, don't you still have me? I am your servant. Don't forget that I am a cheating servant. So what's wrong with finding a cheating master? Wu-ming said frivolously. So it's just Leviticus. You still have all of us. If we all disappear, I can understand that you're devastated. But if you're devastated because of Lev's disappearance, then you're really sorry for all of us who care about you. Listening to Wu-ming's words and feeling the warmth of Wu-ming's back, Olga Marie calmed down. At this moment, Olga Marie seemed to be out of the shadow caused by Lev's death. That's right. I'm really embarrassed like this. Olga Marie smiled, and it was a smile without the slightest arrogance. That's why. It's better to be frank like this. Wu-ming suddenly turned his head and looked at Olga Marie's smiling face and said, seeing that Wu-ming was going to tease her again, Olga Marie was angry again. You? How dare you say Lev? You're a mere servant. Now, Olga and Marie were no longer in a state of confusion over Rafe's affairs. Mama, don't pay attention to the details. Wu-ming smiled and stood up. Since there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to find Gilgamesh. After all, she's not a good child who would go home on her own. Wu-ming said as he prepared to leave. Wait a minute. I have already told you about me. What about you? Olga Marie seriously stared at Wu-ming, as if to say, don't even think about running away. What do you mean by telling you about yourself? In the end, I'm the one who comforted you, you arrogant master. Wu-ming teased Olga Marie, making Olga Marie furious again. Assassin, anyway, we still have a long way to go. I'll leave it to you to slowly discover my things. That's it. See you later. Wu-ming smiled at Olga Marie. After saying that, Wu-ming's spirit body disappeared. Still have a long way to go. That's right. Olga Marie smiled and happily returned to the house. However, she didn't know that she was already dead. However, Wu-ming won't let this fact come true. The cheating servant has already thought of a way to let her cheating master live. The next morning, everyone in the villa was basically in a state of deep sleep. Even several servants were resting, maintaining their spirit bodies. Ha! Cuculin yawned, which was the product of boredom. Really? Why do I have to keep watch at night? I've already set up the alarm. The servants also need to rest. Cuculin protested. Because Cuculin spoke nonsense to Olga Marie, Wu-ming specially punished Cuculin to keep watch at night in a state of non-spirit body. However, Cuculin completely protested. Because of this, Wu-ming specially played a game of rock, paper, scissors with Cuculin. The result was naturally Wu-ming's victory. Later, after Cuculin began to keep watch at night, Wu-ming left the villa. Looking at the time, senior brother should be back soon. Cuculin said to himself, bored. When Wu-ming went out, he said that regardless of whether he achieved his goal or not, Wu-ming would come back in the morning. At this time, a runestone next to Cuculin suddenly burned. This phenomenon was the alarm device set by Cuculin in the distance of the villa was triggered. Wu-ming's return naturally wouldn't trigger the alarm trap. and it was basically impossible for there to be any living people in this city. So the person who triggered the trap could only be one person. A servant. Cuculin frowned. Accompanied by the golden particles, Stheno and Yaeli appeared in front of Cuculin. Is it an enemy? Stheno asked. Although Stheno and the other servants were resting in spirit body, they could still detect if something happened. Ah, yes, it's an old acquaintance. Through the runestone set up by Cuculin over there, Cuculin saw the enemy's face. Where's Lancer? Is she still asleep? Cuculin livened up the atmosphere and teased. Sister is accompanying her master. After all, her master is still a cute child. Uraili smiled and licked her lips. It felt like she was going to eat Sakura Madu. Let's not talk about that for now. He's heading this way. His target is indeed here. Cuculin looked at the burning marks on the runestone and judged the enemy's movements. So, are you ready? I can't provide combat power. Stheno said. Ah, of course. You just need to be responsible for waking up the masters now. Cuculin said confidently. Stheno and Uraili looked at each other, then nodded and disappeared in spirit body again. Then, let me see if you can defend against my attack, Fergus. Chapter 360. Not far from Wuming's villa, on the edge of a collapsed house, there was a half-naked man carrying a huge spiral sword. Really, such an intact house. Isn't it obvious that I'm here? Fergus shook his head with some boredom. Basically, in the current Winterwood city, there were no intact houses. If they didn't turn into ruins, they would be burning. The better ones were only able to maintain the basic structure of the house, with only a small part of it collapsing. The small shop that Wu Ming and Algamai found was like that. The small shop was located in a remote corner, and the fire basically didn't reach it. But these houses in Winterwood City had one thing in common. That was they were all dilapidated. In Wu Ming's small villa, because of Gilgamesh's protection, the villa was beautiful and intact. The house looked like a high-rise bungalow, incomparably obvious. Maybe it's the residence of a servant. Let's go and take a look. Fergus said as he walked toward the villa. After taking a few steps, Fergus clearly felt traces of magic around him. Boom! Fergus raised his sword and blasted it toward a house that had been turned into ruins somewhere around him. The ruins were blown away in an instant, and it was completely destroyed. At the same time, the traces of magic also disappeared. Detection? Could it be Cuculin? Fergus thought. Although it was impossible for Cuculin to survive his noble phantasm, there were exceptions to everything. As Cuculin's adoptive father and friend, Fergus naturally wouldn't underestimate Cuculin. Cuculin did have the ability to survive this magic sword. This is my negligence. If it's Cuculin, he can indeed survive. Fergus showed a man smile. Since that's the case, then let's fight again. Fergus sped up as he spoke. However, Fergus didn't notice that the rune of Rune had already started to burn on the path he had to pass through. Cuculin, who was far away in the villa's courtyard, closed his eyes and felt the arrival of Fergus, then smiled. I'm a caster, Fergus. After that, Cuculin moved his finger. Boom! Around Fergus' position, intense flames erupted and rushed into the sky. The sound of the explosion resounded through the clouds. What? Is the enemy's servant attacking us? Godatsi's bracelet shouted in panic as he rushed over. Calm down, Doctor. The enemy is not coming, Matthew said calmly. Is that so? It's never wrong to be a little more careful. Roman laughed awkwardly as he tried to salvage the situation. However, this only made things even more awkward. BZZ. Then, Roman's image appeared beside Godatsi. Is this Cuculin, the son of Light of Ireland? Roman asked as he looked at Cuculin, whose eyes were closed. Regarding the current situation, as well as various information, Mashu had already reported to Chaldea, so Roman also knew about Cuculin. What's with the sound of soft-footed shrimp? Cuculin opened his eyes and looked at Roman. Soft-footed prawn. Roman turned around in disappointment, looking like he couldn't take it anymore. Pull yourself together, Roman. Romeo. Olga Marie scolded Roman. Ah, Doctor, you have to be strong. Gadotsi comforted Roman somewhat weakly. Then, Gadotsi looked at the explosion in the distance that had almost stopped. Is it your noble phantasm, Cuculin? It's really spectacular. Matthew thought for a moment and denied Gadotsi's words. It shouldn't be, senpai. For a noble phantasm, its power is a bit too weak. Although Matthew's noble phantasm was also very weak, in Matthew's opinion, the noble phantasm of the Son of Light of Ireland should not be like his own. Matthew is right. This is just a magic explosion caused by me using the magic workshop to connect to the ley lines. It's not a noble phantasm. Cuculin nodded and confirmed Matthew's conclusion. When Cuculin came to the villa, Wuming asked Cuculin to build a magic workshop around the area. Once a magician built a magic workshop, he was no longer a candidate for the weakest servant, but a candidate for the strongest servant. So that means, at this time, Roman had recovered. He turned around and looked at everyone seriously. The enemy hasn't left yet, Olga Marie said calmly, crossing her arms over her chest. That's right, the enemy's servant did not leave. With that, Cuculin closed his eyes again and slammed his staff on the ground. The enemy is the warrior of the Red Branch Knights, Fergus McElroy. Be prepared for the enemy's attack. Fergus McElroy, the magic sword user? It's really a headache. Olga Marie frowned. Now that Assassin has not come back, and the two goddesses can't fight. At present, we only have Caster Cuculin, Lancer Anna, and Shielda Matthew. The enemy is Fergus, the magic sword user, which is very unfavorable for us. Listening to Olga Marie's analysis, Matthew, Gadotsi, and Roman on the screen all looked at Olga Marie strangely. It feels like, leader, the enemy is different from before. Gadotsi said slowly. Well, it seems to be more confident and more majestic. Matthew also nodded, indicating that he agreed with Gadotsi's statement. Hey, leader, what happened to you? Roman asked directly. No, you will be the temporary administrator of Chaldea for me. Don't ask so much. Then, Roman was scolded by Olga Marie. Poor doctor. Gadotsi and Matthew looked sympathetically at Roman, who had a "I was wrong, please forgive me" look. Matthew, protect Tachika. Roman, you assist Cuculin to detect the surrounding magical situation. I'll go find Anna. Olga Marie ordered. Yes, leader. At this time, Anna's voice came. No, I'm already here. A soft and delicate voice came from behind everyone. Anna was wearing a large hooded cloak and holding a scythe. Miss Anna, where's Miss Sakura Madu? Matthew asked with concern. I asked my sisters to take care of her. Anna answered concisely. That's right. They can only take care of the little girl since they can't fight. Olga Marie nodded. After all, the two of them were the enemy's servants. If they were suddenly controlled by the command curse, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the restraint of the heavenly lock was still necessary. Detected a high-density magical reaction in front of us. Speculated to be a noble artifact. Roman's voice suddenly came. What? Everyone didn't expect the opponent to use a noble artifact as soon as he came, and the opponent's movement speed was too fast. Ha ha! Take this move of mine. Cuculin. Calibulk. Chapter 361. Calibulk, Neon Sword. A rainbow-colored beam of light came from a short distance away. Everything that was shrouded by the rainbow-colored beam of light turned into ashes. Like a surging wave, the rainbow-colored beam of light rushed towards them and soon arrived in front of Cuculin and the others. Matthew, Gadotsi shouted quickly. Yes, clang. Matthew stuck his 2-meter-tall shield into the ground. Lord Chaldea's, simulating the beginning of humanity. The air seemed to vibrate and made a buzzing sound. White lines appeared and formed the shape of a brick. Then, the brick appeared and became solid. A holy chalk wall appeared in front of everyone. Boom! The rainbow-colored beam of light hit the chalk wall and made a loud noise. Ugh! Matthew struggled to support his shield, and the tall chalk wall was faintly falling. Fergus's noble phantasm was an A++ grade noble phantasm. Matthew had just been able to release his noble phantasm yesterday, so it was still a little difficult for him to fight against the neon sword. At this moment, Cuculin waved his staff. At this moment, countless lune runes appeared around the villa, including the ground inside the villa. Countless lune runes turned into pure magic and attached to the chalk wall in front of Matthew. The chalk wall became unusually strong and resisted Fergus's noble phantasm, the neon sword. Soon, the rainbow-colored beam of light disappeared, and Matthew successfully resisted the neon sword. These runes that I set up just in case have come in handy. Cuculin grinned. Thank you very much, Mr. Cuculin. Matthew took a short break. Soha held his shield and thanked Cuculin. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. The enemy is coming. Cuculin's expression became serious. Oh. This is the warrior who resisted my noble phantasm. I didn't expect it to be a delicate girl. A hearty voice came from where Cuculin was looking. Matthew and the others began to get ready. A burly man walked over. The 3 deep scratches on his chest were quite conspicuous. Although it was within my expectations that the relic would be blocked, I didn't expect it to be such a beautiful girl. Fergus said heartily as he looked at Matthew with praise. However, Matthew felt that Fergus's eyes were full of aggression. Although I expected you to find this place, your speed is beyond my expectations, Cuculin said to Fergus. Well, we have a good caster on our side. His brain is more flexible than yours. Fergus laughed. Cuculin and Olga Marie secretly noted this down. This was another piece of valuable information. Then, let's end the feeling. This way, I can rest. This trip to the modern world was really boring. Fergus raised his magic sword once again. Is he going to release his noble phantasm again? Olga Marie was surprised. The magic consumption of the A++ level noble phantasm was quite large, but Fergus was able to release 2 noble phantasms in less than a minute. It was amazing. After all, I have a master who is like a cheat. Fergus's spiral sword began to condense a colorful light. Then I'll do it again. Matthew dragged his tired body and was ready to release his noble phantasm again. However, Cuculin smiled. Then you have to hurry up, Fergus. That's why he's back. As soon as Cuculin's voice fell, countless swords, spears, swords, and halberds suddenly bombarded Fergus. These were all noble phantasms. Boom, boom, boom. Countless noble phantasms caused violent explosions. The wind blew so hard that Olga Marie and Gadotsi couldn't open their eyes. Master! Matthew quickly stood in front of Gadotsi, blocking the hurricane for her. Behind Olga Marie, a figure appeared and supported her. So you're back. Olga Marie felt relieved when she felt the broad shoulders behind her. At present, if one were to talk about the backbone of this small team, it would be none other than Wu Ming. And I've brought a surprise, Master, Wu Ming said with a smile. Countless noble phantasms stopped shooting, and the explosions also stopped. Wu Ming waved his hand, and a wind attribute Lune Rune Stone appeared, blowing away all the smoke and dust caused by the explosions, revealing Fergus, who was in the center of the explosion. Even if it was Fergus under the noble phantasm's attack, his neon sword's noble phantasm would have been interrupted. Fergus was also injured by the noble phantasm and the explosion. Fergus knelt on the ground with one knee, supporting himself with his magic sword. Oh, I see. You guys found her. Fergus seemed to know who made the noble phantasm attack, just now, and said with a clear conscience, "Oomph, mongrel bastard. Last time you escaped. This time, this king won't be careless." Gilgamesh's figure appeared on the broken street lamp. Gilgamesh, who had left the villa alone, was finally found by Wu Ming. Gilgamesh was wearing a rather revealing golden armor. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at the embarrassed Fergus with anger in his eyes. "Yo, did you rope Archer in?" Cuculin came to us and said with surprise. As the existence who set up the magic workshop, Cuculin said that when Fergus released the first neon sword, he noticed that Gilgamesh, Wu Ming, was approaching. Thus, Cuculin didn't rush to deal with Fergus. Instead, he chatted with him to pass the time. However, Wu Ming shook his head. "Archer is one of my people. There's no need to talk about roping him in." When he said this, not only Cuchulain, but also Olga Marie were surprised. Listening to Wuming's words, it didn't seem like a simple alliance. Olga Marie thought carefully. Well, it's fine as long as he's one of us. Cuchulain waved his hand and didn't ask anything. After all, it was useless to know that Gilgamesh was one of them. Olga Marie looked at Gilgamesh and Wuming with a guessing gaze. Let Fergus leave, Gil. Then, Wuming said to Gilgamesh. Annoying, of course I know. Gilgamesh refuted Wuming, and then stretched out his hand. A few golden ripples appeared around Fergus, and a few silver chains instantly tied up Fergus, who was injured and didn't manage to dodge. It seems that I'll have to stop here. Although Gilgamesh's Enkidu only had a special attack on enemies with divinity, for a servant like Fergus with high strength, he could still break free. However, Gilgamesh used Enkidu's Enkidu to deal with Fergus, and only needed a moment to bind him. Poochie. Chapter 362. A few high-level relics appeared from the golden ripples and pierced through Fergus, who was bound by Enkidu. Fergus's body began to glow. It was a sign that the hero's spirit was about to leave the stage. Well, I don't expect to be able to escape a second time after meeting you. Although Fergus was about to leave, he still smiled calmly. This is the price you have to pay for daring to recklessly size up this prince. As he spoke, Gilgamesh moved his arm again. Golden ripples appeared, and a high-level relic appeared, cutting Fergus in half. In an instant, Fergus' corpse turned into blue mana particles and disappeared with the wind. At this point, Red Saber, Fergus Mac Roy exited. Then, Gilgamesh looked at Gadatsi and the rest who were next to Wuming. Is this your new partner? Hyunryong, you're so useless. Gilgamesh looked at Gadatsi and the rest and laughed. Olga Marie looked at Wuming in surprise. It was a different way of addressing him. Although you're weak, your courage to look directly at this king is commendable. Gilgamesh stopped laughing and praised Gadatsi and the rest. All right, get ready. We're going to Winterwood City's Big Hollow, Wuming said. Soon, the courtyard of the villa was cleared. As Fergus's neon sword covered a large area, part of the villa was destroyed. The courtyard was filled with broken stones. After all, Matthew had just been able to release his relic not long ago. He could not completely protect the villa. His relic could only protect Gadatsi and the rest. Therefore, the villa, including the roof, was basically destroyed. In the courtyard, Gilgamesh sat on his exclusive seat. He closed his eyes and crossed his arms as he waited. Gadatsi and the rest looked serious. They looked at Wuming and waited for Wuming to speak. Roman turned on the remote screen, which was rare. The screen appeared next to Gadatsi. However, when Roman appeared, Gilgamesh looked at Roman differently. Stheno and Uraili brought Sakura Madu out of the room. As soon as Tong Ying came out, she ran into Anna's arms and hugged him tightly. It seemed like the neon sword had scared the little girl. Now, there are only 4 enemies left, Wuming said. Apart from King Arthur, the Black Saber, we've also confirmed the identities of the Red Rider and Red Lancer. The Red Rider is the king of the kingdom of Macedon. He's known as the Conquering King and Alexander the Great. His name is Iskandar Alexander. That king, huh? Roman pondered. Oomph. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, snorted in displeasure. This gave Roman a fright. To Gilgamesh, there was only one king in the world, and that was his hero king, Gilgamesh. Ignoring Gilgamesh's snort, Wuming continued. The identity of the Red Lancer has also been confirmed. He's the great hero of India, Karna. This statement caused everyone to exclaim in surprise. Although they were prepared for this, they still found it hard to believe. After all, Karna was too powerful. But you can rest assured that with Gil here, you can rest assured. Wuming comforted everyone. As if responding to Wuming's words, Gilgamesh opened his eyes and glanced at everyone with his red pupils. That great hero will be handed over to this king. Just watch. Gilgamesh said domineeringly. He's really reliable. Gadatsi laughed. The identity of the Red Caster is still unknown. He was too cautious and did not reveal his real name. Not to mention the noble phantasm, He basically did not reveal anything. He's been following the Red Rider like an ordinary person. Wuming frowned. Well, I'll deal with the caster first. Gil will deal with Karna. Anna and Cuculin will deal with the conquering king. Wuming began to assign tasks. Understood, Cuculin replied, and Anna just nodded. Oof. This king can easily deal with Karna. Gilgamesh said proudly. You have the capital to be proud, but I don't want to clean up the mess for you in the end. Wuming said flatly. Oof. This king knows. Although he was still proud, he was frank this time. Then, Wuming looked at Cuculin and Anna. Iskandar is a high-level heroic spirit. You have to be careful. Don't worry. If we can, we will make him leave. If we can't, we will just hold him back. Cuculin said with a smile. Wuming saw that Anna did not move, and Cuculin smiled and nodded helplessly. I hope it will go well. Wuming always felt that Iskandar was not so easy to deal with. The other party was a king with the title of conquering king. That, Master Assassin, what about us? At this time, Matthew raised a small hand and asked like a good student. Gadotsi also looked at Wuming playfully. Assassin, you didn't forget about us, did you? How could that be? I gave you the most important task. Wuming said with a smile. Could it be? Olga Marie had almost guessed it, the only enemy that no one dealt with. Black Saber, King Arthur, that is your opponent. As if following Olga Marie's words, Wuming directly revealed the mystery. Hey, hey, hey! Matthew and Gadotsi shouted. They never thought that the one they had to deal with was the ultimate boss, King Arthur. Have confidence in yourself, Matthew to Chica. Wuming advised the two. You have this shield of reason. It's just a holy sword. You can definitely defend against it. But, Matthew was still a little worried. No matter what, sending an immature follower was too rash. What he thought the power he used was the power of King Arthur's knight, Galahad. Matthew was a little worried. Using the power of a subordinate to fight against a loyal superior, Matthew inevitably felt a little uncomfortable. I remember that there's a story that compares who is stronger between a shield and a spear. Then this time, let's compare who is stronger between a holy sword and a holy shield. Wuming walked to Matthew's side and patted Matthew's little head. This attracted the attention of Olga Marie and Gilgamesh. Li Xiang is here too. Don't be discouraged just because the enemy is King Arthur. You have to protect your master. Matthew looked at Gadotsi, then looked at Wuming and nodded confidently. Yes, I understand, Senpai. Then, I will follow Matthew and Tachika. Olga Marie suddenly said. You don't need my help, do you? Olga Marie looked at Wuming. Of course, as your follower, I am very strong. Wuming nodded. It was a wise choice to let Olga Marie follow Matthew and Gadotsi. The reliable Olga Marie could take care of the nervous too. Gilgamesh looked at Olga Marie critically, then shook his head disinterestedly and said nothing. Stheno and Euryale, you two will be responsible for protecting Sakura Madu. Even if most of your power is sealed by Enkidu, you can still protect a little girl. Wuming looked at Stheno and Euryale. Of course. Leave it to me. The two answered affirmatively. Then, Wuming glanced at everyone. In short, the enemy may gather in the big hole in Winterwood City based on our movements. What we need to do is to defeat them, repair the singularity, and save the world. Everyone, do your best. Oh. Chapter 363. Everyone began to move towards the Yuanzong mountain. However, civilians should just walk on the ground. Gilgamesh said proudly and took out Vamona from his gate of Babylon. Accompanied by a loud roar, Gilgamesh left angrily. Why would he be angry? So Gilgamesh invited Wuming to go to Vamona together, but Wuming refused. So Gilgamesh left angrily. You really dare? Hero King's eyes are burning with fire. Cuculin said beside Wuming. Gadotsi and the others all nodded frantically. Just now, everyone could see Gilgamesh's anger. After all, I'm going with Gilgamesh. What if you get into trouble? Wuming was right. Although Wuming seemed to have 7 servants, they didn't have much combat power. Stheno and Euryale, because they were bound by Wuming's fake Enkidu, they couldn't fight. Matthew and Anna, both of them were immature servants. One was a subservient that had just been given power, and the other was a young servant that was summoned in an immature state. Their attribute values were not strong. They could be regarded as average. Although the two of them had great potential, it was just potential. It was the same as having an attribute value of D++. Although they were only D class, they could burst out 3 times the power at a critical moment, and they could instantly surpass a class. But that was only for a moment, and they were only D class under normal circumstances, so it couldn't be counted as strength. As for Cuculin was summoned as a caster. He wasn't weak, but the general ability value of a caster servant was very low. Once they encountered a surprise attack, the chances of them surviving were not high. Now, only Gilgamesh and Wuming could serve as trump cards. Gilgamesh had the Gate of Babylon, which contained countless treasures. Moreover, he had the Guile-parting sword Ea, which gave him an invincible battle strength. However, your frontal combat ability is not strong. You can ambush the enemy, but you're not suitable to deal with the enemy's surprise attack. Olga Marie naturally understood this principle and analyzed it. She believed that Wuming also understood this principle. Although Wuming was strong, it was summoned as an assassin. Its attributes were more inclined towards assassination and detection, and its relic was targeted at females. Its skills were only for an assassin, so it could not be called a trump card. Therefore, Wuming could follow Gilgamesh and leave first. However, Wuming rejected Gilgamesh's proposal. I naturally have a way. Wuming smiled and remained mysterious. Let's not talk about this first. In the current situation, I think it is wiser for us to go together. Cuculin also expressed his own opinion. Well, that's it. Wuming smiled and said nothing. He continued to move forward. Gadotsi and others followed. Olga Marie was helpless for a while, and then followed the large group. By the way, why do you know so much? Olga Marie asked. Everyone could understand that Olga Marie was asking about the enemy servant's intelligence. When he heard Olga Marie's question, Wuming thought of what happened last night. Wuming went out to look for Gilgamesh and accidentally met a few servants. They were the red-haired Red Rider and the unusually cautious Red Caster who dressed like an ordinary person. When he was exchanging information with everyone, there was one thing that Wuming didn't mention. Even if Wuming had seen Caster's appearance before, Wuming once looked for Gemman Zelik and saw a young man beside him. It was said that he was Emilo II, the current monarch of modern magic. However, Wuming was sure that the person was not Emilo II. According to Wuming's speculation, it was likely that he was relying on something else. After that, it seemed that Caster's noble phantasm exposed Wuming's whereabouts. In order to avoid trouble, Wuming quickly left. After all, the main task was to find Gilgamesh, not to fight with the enemy. Ryder and Caster didn't chase after him, so Wuming left safely. Later, it seemed that Gilgamesh also sensed Wuming's aura, so he drove Wuming to Wuming's side. After all, Wuming was now Gilgamesh's master, so they could naturally sense each other when they were not far away. After finding Gilgamesh, Wuming didn't rush to take Gilgamesh back to the villa. Instead, he found a roof and asked Gilgamesh if he knew any information about the enemy. So, Wuming knew the identity of his Kandar and Karna, but he didn't know the true identity of Caster. The real names of his Kandar, Karna, and Darius III were told to Wuming by Gilgamesh. According to Gilgamesh, Iskandar reported his name at the beginning, and he also reported the real name of Darius III. It had to be said that Iskandar's king's demeanor was quite heroic. Since Winterwood City was suddenly burned by a fire, Gilgamesh left the villa. On the surface, he said that he came out to have fun, but in fact, Gilgamesh was worried about Wuming's situation, so he went out to find Wuming. After sensing that the contract between Wuming and himself was still there, plus Gilgamesh was instigated by some people. As a result, Gilgamesh kept fighting with several servants. Wuming observed several small explosions on the tall building, many of which were caused by Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh treated Fergus cruelly because Fergus flirted with Gilgamesh, and as a result, he was chased by Gilgamesh. Because this is the information that Gil collected during this time, plus the information that I collected. She caused a lot of trouble outside. Wu Ming smiled. Then what do you have to deal with the incoming enemies? Olga Marie continued to ask. Wu Ming stopped, turned his head, and looked at everyone. This, Gadotsi and the others looked at Wu Ming attentively. It's a secret. Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Gadotsi and the others almost fell to the ground. You bastard. Olga Marie angrily clenched her fists and looked at Wu Ming. Ha ha. As expected of senior brother. Cuculin also laughed. On the contrary, the three Gorgon sisters didn't care about this from the beginning, and they didn't feel disappointed or tricked. Just in time, the enemy is coming. Senior brother, show us. Although Cuculin said jokingly, his expression became serious. Boom, moo. Accompanied by the roar of thunder and the roar of the sacred bull, a chariot pulled by two bulls flew from the sky. Chapter 364. Alalalala, Conqueror King Iskandar is here. The driver of the war chariot was a muscular man with short red hair and red pupils. He was dressed in an ancient armor and a red cloak, and he shouted loudly, Oh, Gorgon's goddess is here? Well, it looks like you've been captured, ahaha. Sure enough, the Conqueror King Alexander the Great. Iskandar's king's temperament was really heroic. Everyone couldn't help but think of the word heroic in their hearts. Forget it, do as you wish. On the chariot, the man with long hair and modern clothes next to Iskandar said indifferently, Oh, Kongming, I still think that telling us our names is what heroes should do, ha ha. Iskandar's bearded face that was connected to his hair laughed and patted the shoulder of the young man called Kongming. Well, that guy exposed Castor's real name again. Wu Ming's guess was right. This was not Ermero II, but a servant who came through Ermero II's body. So, this cautious servant is the resourceful military counselor, Zhuge Kongming. Cuculin nodded. No wonder he is so cautious. Even Assassin didn't find out his real name. Matthew praised. Ah, yes. After all, he is known for his caution. Zhuge Ming is cautious all his life. This sentence was not said for nothing. Well, Zhuge Kongming rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. Didn't we agree not to reveal my real name? Conqueror King? Zhuge Kongming said with some distress. What does it matter? Everyone here is a hero who is about to face King Arthur. It is the final moment. There is no need to hide your real name. Iskandar laughed unconsciously and patted Zhuge Kongming's body again. Forget it. Zhuge Kongming dodged Iskandar's arm and looked at the others. That's right. My real name is Zhuge Kongming. I'm a sinner who failed to restore the Han dynasty. There's no point in remembering it. Zhuge Kongming said indifferently. Then, Zhuge Kongming looked at Wu Ming. Do you recognize this body of mine? I'll say this in advance. I didn't erase his consciousness. Instead, I let his consciousness sleep within my body. After all, there's a huge problem with this Holy Grail war, Zhuge Kongming explained. Generally speaking, the servant who descended through dependence had the ability to erase the consciousness of the body. However, Zhuge Kongming didn't do that. Instead, he chose to put his body's consciousness to sleep and act on his behalf. This was similar to Matthew. Matthew's power was Galahad's departure, leaving the power for Matthew to use. On the other hand, Zhuge Kongming put the consciousness of the human body to sleep and let him, an outsider, take over. In addition, the servant who descended through dependence could also choose to integrate with the consciousness of the body. There were very few servants who would choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. Basically, if they weren't evil people, they wouldn't choose to erase the consciousness of the human body. I understand the general situation. Are you going to hinder us? Wu Ming asked. How is that possible? I'm here to ask for your help. Iskandar laughed and said something that surprised everyone. After all, we belong to the human side. The guy who summoned us is obviously standing on the opposite side of the human. Zhuge Kongming explained. Zhuge Kongming said, and Iskandar stopped his chariot on the ground. Let's not talk about helping us first. Isn't your master that man? Wuming asked as he looked at the two chariots that landed on the ground. Yes, you're right. We are indeed that man's servants. Iskandar admitted generously. I know what you're worried about. If we work together with you, it's hard to guarantee that our master won't attack you at a critical moment. That was why Wuming put the heavenly lock on Stheno and Euryale. But don't worry. My noble phantasm can suppress such a situation. Iskandar laughed. My noble phantasm is an area of effect formation. Not only can it weaken the enemy, but it can also resist the master's command. Unless more than 3 command curses are activated at the same time, it won't work, Zhuge Kongming explained. Wuming looked at Stheno and Euryale. That way, the two of them would be able to fight as well. The man in the green hat placed a command curse on each of our 7 servants from the beginning. So, as long as we're within the range of Kongming's noble phantasm, his command curse will lose its effect. Ahaha, you're indeed a wise strategist. You're extraordinary. Iskandar laughed again and patted Zhuge Kongming's shoulder. However, Iskandar did not notice that Zhuge Kongming was about to lose it. The man in the green hat has been with Saber all this time, and he doesn't show any signs of leaving. So, I've hidden my noble phantasm in the big hole in Winterwood City. You just have to activate it when the time comes, Zhuge Kongming explained. I see. Wuming looked at his companions and nodded. Well then, I wish us a pleasant cooperation, Wuming said with a smile and extended his hand. Pleasant cooperation. Zhuge Kongming also extended his hand and shook hands with Iskandar. By the way, do you guys want to be my subordinates? Iskandar looked at Wuming and the others with joy. Sigh. Matthew and Gadatsi were stunned. Olga Marie shook her head disinterestedly. Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa shook their heads without even thinking about it. Sorry, I don't want to be someone's subordinate. I want to be free. Besides, I already have a master. Cuculin grinned and pointed at Gadatsi behind him. How about you, assassin? Your assassination skills are superb. I didn't even notice you. However, you don't look like a villain, so I welcome you to join my army. Iskandar saw that everyone rejected him and looked at Wuming, who had yet to speak. Wuming smiled at Iskandar's words. I've taught many kings. You don't need me to teach you. The one beside you is enough. Wuming's meaning was obvious. He chose to reject as well. I've said before, with their personalities, they won't be your subordinates, Zhuge Kongming said calmly. Ha, you won't know if you don't try. What a pity. Iskandar saw that no one wanted to join his army. He was not embarrassed. Instead, he laughed happily. At this time, Wuming's words attracted Olga Marie's attention again. Even Matthew, Gadatsi, Anna, and even Cuculin looked at Wuming in surprise. Stheno and Euryale, who had already seen Wuming's identity for the Goddess God Core, were not surprised. Senior brother, you've been through a lot. But it seems like you're doing well, Cuculin praised. Well, I've been through a lot. However, I'll tell you about it when I have the chance. Wuming smiled at Gadatsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie's curious faces. Then, Wuming walked forward. Now, the most important thing is to end this. Chapter 365. With the addition of Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming, the pressure on Wuming and the rest was significantly reduced. Now, the only enemies left were Artoria, Karna, and Leviticus. It was undoubtedly much easier. Then, the two groups separated. Wuming and the rest were working together with Iskandar, but there was no need for the two groups to work together. In order to prevent us from being discovered, let's split up temporarily. When you reach the big hole, we'll come to support you. After that, Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming continued to carry out the mission of the command incantation, which was to kill all living creatures. However, in Winterwood City, the only living creatures were Wuming and the rest, as well as their servants. Therefore, the command incantation was not convincing at all. In addition, a long time had passed, so they knew that the command incantation's coercive power had basically disappeared. Naturally, Stheno and Euryale felt the same way. However, to be safe, Wuming did not let them come into contact with Enkidu. After all, there was nothing wrong with being cautious. while Iskandar and Zhuge Kongming were constantly destroying the destroyed houses. Wu Ming and the rest were heading toward Winterwood City in Yuanzhong Mountain. When they were almost at the foot of Yuanzhong Mountain, Wu Ming realized that something was wrong. The concentration of magic on Yuanzhong Mountain was a little high. Boom! At that moment, the sound of an explosion came from the mountain. Gilgamesh has encountered an enemy. Wu Ming took a step forward and headed toward the direction of the explosion. Pay attention to the surroundings. After that, Wu Ming disappeared. Near the top of Yuanzhong Mountain, two figures were moving rapidly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Golden ripples constantly emerged from the back of the golden figure. Countless relics were shot out, and the target was the other golden figure. Bang, bang, bang. However, the golden red figure's martial arts skills were extraordinary. The strange long spear in his hand was constantly waving, knocking away the treasures one after another. Damn it, you bastard! How dare you shoot down this king's mount? As he spoke, Gilgamesh kept activating the gate of Babylon, and countless relics were shot at the spearman again. The order I received is to kill anyone who dares to go up the mountain. Your Vimana is also a forbidden item, Gilgamesh. The spearman said Gilgamesh's real name. Then you shall receive the king's wrath. Karna. That was right. The one who was fighting with Gilgamesh was Karna, the hero of India. Karna was originally ordered to go to Winterwood City to kill all living creatures, but there were basically no living creatures others as followers. It was at that time that Karna discovered Gilgamesh, who was hanging out outside. He's not a servant. Karna had Karna sneak attack, Karna tes. Although Gilgamesh was quite arrogant, he did have the right to be arrogant. Under the attack of Karna's Brahma, cursed me, Brahma, Kundala, Gilgamesh successfully released a shield from his treasury before the attack arrived and blocked Karna's throwing relics. Then, the two of them began to fight. However, Karna seemed to have received some kind of message, and he abandoned the battle and fled. Gilgamesh did not chase after Karna, saying that he was a bastard who ran away. Just now, when Gilgamesh drove the Vimana to the top of the Yuanzhong Mountain, suddenly, another Brahma, curse me, Brahma, curse me, spear pierced through the Vimana, and the Vimana disappeared in the starlight. On the other hand, Gilgamesh, who was sitting on the Vimana, was incomparably furious. How dare a bastard shoot down this king's ride? This king will make you regret your blindness. Therefore, the two of them began to fight. The two of them were able to recognize each other because their respective characteristics were somewhat similar, and Wu Ming and Lev had also told Gilgamesh and Karna about the enemy's characteristics. In addition, the two of them were not very far from each other, so naturally, they knew each other's identities. Come on, Hero King Gilgamesh. Although he was surprised that the Hero King, Gilgamesh, was a woman at first, Karna did not underestimate Gilgamesh. After a series of actions, Karna could see that Gilgamesh was a powerful king. Then hundreds and even thousands of golden ripples appeared, surrounding Karna and Gilgamesh. Then hundreds and thousands of relics slowly emerged from the golden ripples. You should be satisfied to be bombarded by so many relics, Karna. Gilgamesh mocked Karna. Karna did not speak. Instead, he carefully looked at the weapons and relics. According to Karna's analysis, the only weapons that could pose a threat to him were divine weapons and weapons with the special ability to ignore defense. After all, Karna's golden armor could weaken all damage, and he knew 1/10 of it was a divine artifact armor. It was said that the armor given by the sun god, Surya, condensed light itself. It was said that even people could not hurt Karna at all. If Karna had enough mana, he could even keep his body unharmed. Lev, who had established a contract with the seven servants, naturally had enough mana, so Karna was now very strong. To be able to die under these hundreds and thousands of treasures, you should be satisfied. At this time, Gilgamesh was in a good mood. He smiled at Karna, who was trapped in the middle of countless golden ripples. Die! After that, the hundreds and thousands of relics all shot toward Karna from the golden ripples. At this time, Karna also moved. Boom! 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 That was the sound of countless relics exploding when they hit Karna. Bang, 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 bang. The sound of hard objects colliding was constantly heard. That was the sound of Karna knocking away the relics. As for the treasures that were shot at Karna and touched him, they all exploded. The wind and flames from the explosion shone brightly on Karna, but Karna continued to selectively deflect some of the treasures away. Without exception, all the treasures that were sent flying by Karna were treasures that could restrain Karna's divinity armor. As for the treasures that attacked Karna's body, they couldn't even break through Karna's defense. It must be noted that Wuming defeated Karna last time because Karna's golden armor had disintegrated. Taking advantage of that opportunity, Wuming injured Karna with his light cannon. Do you think it's that easy? Gilgamesh sneered. Chapter 366. Put dash. Several noble artifacts pierced through Karna's body, and blood splattered everywhere. The noble artifacts that were inserted into Karna's body turned into spots of golden light and were retrieved by Gilgamesh into the gate of Babylon. Cough. I see. You hid these noble artifacts in the shadows of other noble artifacts. As expected of the hero king, Karna coughed up blood and said with some shame, Gilgamesh was an archer. After all, if he just threw noble artifacts around, it would be too degrading. Oomph. Bastard, this is the price you pay for attacking this king, Gilgamesh said disdainfully. At this moment, a huge dark purple tentacle that looked like an octopus suddenly broke out of the ground. In an instant, Karna was tied up by this huge dark purple tentacle without any resistance and was dragged into the hole in the ground created by the tentacle. Oomph. At best, you're just a bastard, Gilgamesh said disdainfully and did not pursue. At this time, Wuming also arrived. Qianriyang, you're late. You didn't see this king's moment of bravery, but seeing that you rushed over to support this king will not argue with you. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming and said arrogantly with squinted eyes. In the eyes of others, Gilgamesh was like a breeze, but at this time, Gilgamesh gave Wuming the feeling of a dog asking for praise from its owner. Yes, so your majesty has the enemy left? Wuming said as he looked at the hole in the ground. Here, this is the hole. A rat-like tentacle took Karna away. Gilgamesh pointed at the hole in the ground and said disdainfully again, Tentacle? Wuming frowned. He had never heard of an enemy servant that could use tentacles. Thinking of this, Wuming squatted down and looked at the hole in the ground. There was a trace of mucus on the edge of the hole. At this time, Gadatsi and the others hurriedly ran up the mountain. Gadatsi and Sakura Madu were both held by their respective servants. Olga Marie's servant, Wuming, had already run up, so Cuculin was the one holding her. But let go of me, Olga Marie said to Cuculin behind her with a red face. The reason Olga Marie became like this was because Cuculin lifted Olga Marie by her collar. It's really troublesome. Anna and Mashu have their own masters, and the two goddesses over there won't do such a rough job. I'm the only one left, and they won't let me hug them, so I can only do this. With that, Cuculin loosened his grip, and Olga Marie fell to the ground. Of course, she landed on her, but first. Damn it, I'll remember you, Cuculin. Olgamai stood up and rubbed her buttocks, looking at Cuculin with shame and indignation. On the other hand, Cuculin looked indifferent. After all, he would return to the Martyr's Palace once the Holy Grail War was over. There was no point in looking for trouble. Something unexpected has happened, Wuming said when he saw that the commotion was almost over. Then, everyone looked at Wuming. Wuming then told them what had happened. Gilgamesh and Karna fought. Then, a tentacle took away Karna, who didn't resist, leaving a hole covered in mucus. According to the information we have, the enemy doesn't have any servants with the ability to control tentacles. Olga Marie touched her chin and said, no matter if it's Karna or King Arthur, neither of them has such an ability, and the other servants have either left or are on our side. Wuming analyzed. In other words, Cuculin frowned. Is there a new servant? Gadatsi was surprised. Tachika is right. Judging from Karna's appearance, the man in the green hat must have summoned another servant. Wuming said solemnly, "Who the hell is that guy? He can summon an unlimited number of servants. What a troublesome enemy." Olga Marie said with a headache, Could it be the ability of the guy who pretended to be Professor Reef?" Matthew raised a small hand and asked, "That's right. The other party can provide 7 servants at once, and he has the purpose of destroying the world. It's very likely that he's not human." Gadotsi said excitedly, as if she had discovered a new continent. "It's not impossible, but I think it's more likely that the other party summoned another servant." Wuming didn't deny Gadotsi's theory, but proposed another possibility. Since the other party can provide 7 servants at once, then it's not impossible to summon another 7 or even more. Assassin is right. We have to prepare for the worst. Olga Marie also nodded. "By the way, why did you believe the Red Rider and Red Caster so easily? Aren't you afraid that they lied to you?" At this time, Olga Marie asked Wuming, "It's not that I don't believe you. I just want to know what you were thinking at that time. Aren't you afraid that they lied to you?" Olga Marie asked carefully. After all, they were in a situation where they would die if they made a wrong move. If the other party lied to them, they would be finished. At that time, Olga Marie wanted to ask, but because the other party was there, she didn't have the nerve to ask. After all, Olga Marie was a magician. It was impossible for her not to be suspicious. "I don't think Iskandar will lie." Wuming smiled, and then continued to move toward the entrance of the Yuanzhong Mountain. "Huh, it's that simple?" Olga Marie found it hard to believe. Just because they believed that the other party wouldn't lie, they cooperated so easily. "I also feel that the king's temperament. I don't think he will lie to us." Matthew thought for a moment and said, "Really, do you have a sixth sense?" Olga Marie said helplessly, Okay, don't talk nonsense, let's go." Cuculin said, pushing Olga Marie. "I know. Let go of me." So, everyone came to the Yuanzhong Mountains Ludong Temple. There was a large passage behind it that led directly to the inside of the big hollow. With the number of Wuming and the others, it was a bit inappropriate to take the previous small path. The whole Winterwood city turned into a field of fire. But the strange thing was that the temple was intact, and only some of the surrounding edges were broken. "Let's go," Wuming said concisely. Just as everyone was about to enter the Ludong Temple, Wuming immediately held out his hand and stopped everyone. Both Cuculin and Wuming looked cautious. "What's wrong? What happened?" Gadotsi asked. "Get ready, there's an enemy." Olga Marie gestured and prepared the magic bullets. Bang! Suddenly, the door of the Ludong Temple was violently opened. Chapter 367. Bang! The door of Ludong Temple was violently opened, but it wasn't an enemy that came out. Instead, it was an octopus-like monster that was as tall as a person with tentacles. In just a few seconds, countless sea monsters filled the Willow Cave Temple. They kept pouring out of the Willow Cave Temple's entrance and rushed towards Wu Ming and the others. "Wah! What? What is this? It's disgusting." Gadotsi was shocked. There was no need to look closely. These monsters were covered in mucus, and the ground they passed through was wet. Olga Marie didn't say anything, but her legs were trembling. Sakura Madu shrank into Anna's arms in fear. Matthew was also afraid, but he still held on. He immediately raised a shield and stood in front of Gadotsi and Olga Marie. Only Gorgon's sister, Stheno, and the others weren't afraid of these things. These things looked like sea monsters. Stheno looked at the tentacle monsters that were advancing and frowned in disgust. Although she wasn't afraid, she still felt disgust. Even the goddess hated these things. "These things aren't worth this king's time. I'll leave them to you." With that, Gilgamesh's spiritual form disappeared. It seemed that she also hated these tentacles. Sure enough, these tentacles have a special attack on women. Wuming thought. "Leave it to me," Anna said and handed Sakura Madu to her sister. Then, she rushed into the sea monsters with her scythe. No one objected. After all, Anna's scythe was more effective against these things that could infinitely regenerate as long as they had magic. The immortal slaughtering blade, Harp. This was the divine sword that had killed the demon Medusa. It could restrain some undying creatures and cause irrecoverable wounds to the opponent. For some inexplicable reason, this sword turned into a scythe and became Anna's weapon when she descended as a lancer. Swish, swish, swish. Just a casual slash was enough to kill a large number of sea monsters in front of him. The power of the undying slaughter blade, Harp, completely killed these sea monsters that should have been able to regenerate. However, it was a little difficult for Anna to deal with the sea monsters that were still pouring out continuously by herself. Boom! A violent explosion came from beside Anna. The sea monster in front of Anna was blown to pieces. Anna turned around and looked behind her. Cuchulainn raised his staff, which was smoking like a gun shaft that had just been fired. Blow them to smithereens. I don't believe they can recover. Cuchulainn grinned. However, Anna was a little dissatisfied. Cleaning up these sea monsters was her mission. The enemy should have discovered us. Let's finish them off and leave as soon as possible. Wuming tried to persuade Anna. Then, Anna nodded with a frown on her face, but she still looked unhappy. Then I won't hold back, Cuchulainn said, laughing wantonly. The lune rune in his hand kept drawing. Countless flames shot at the sea monsters, setting off a series of explosions. Boom, boom, boom. This series of explosions had killed almost 1/3 of the sea monsters. At this time, a few rune stones fell into the center of the remaining sea monsters, producing golden flames. Boom, boom. Then, Cuchulainn looked at Wuming. The two of you should hurry up. Wuming smiled, then threw the lune rune stone in his hand at the sea monsters again. Are we going to compete? I won't lose, Cuchulainn said excitedly, attacking the sea monsters frantically. In less than 5 minutes, the sea monsters that covered the sky disappeared, leaving behind a faint layer of black dust and traces of various elements. Ice, water, fire, wind, thunder, electricity, earth. Traces of almost all elements could be seen. This made Gadazi and the others dumbfounded, especially Olga Marie. That's a rune stone. How could an assassin have so many rune stones? Olga Marie complained crazily. Secrets that could not be known were fatal to Olga Marie. An assassin, where the hell did you get those rune stones from? Why do you have so many types of rune stones? Roman also complained. It's just my ability. Those rune stones were just made when I was bored. Wuming shrugged. However, assassin's damage output is really amazing. Matthew wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. After all, Matthew and the others had been watching from the side. Wuming's damage output was almost higher than Cuchulainn's. Cuchulainn's attack was just a simple red burst of flames, while their lune rune stones were all kinds of elements, so it was easy to distinguish. The reason why Matthew said this was because of the difference in their ranks. Cuchulainn was a caster, so it was normal for him to have AoE damage. After all, he was a mage cannon. However, Wuming was not a caster, but an assassin. As an assassin, he was even more AoE than a caster. It was simply outrageous. I've handed over almost all the offensive runestones I've made in the past. It's normal for them to have such an effect, Wuming said with a smile. He opened a part of the Dragoness space in the center of his palm and threw out a large number of lune rune stones from his noble phantasm. Because they were in a hurry, Wuming bombarded the sea monsters indiscriminately at a speed that even Ma Shu couldn't see clearly. Together with Cuchulainn, the two of them were able to destroy all the sea monsters that could affect the entire Fuyuki city in 5 minutes. There was another reason why Wuming used up all the lune rune stones. After all, they can be made in the future, can't they? These rune stones were made to deal with situations similar to this. Wuming smiled. At this time, Gilgamesh lifted his spirit form. As far as actors are concerned, these pieces of trash are not qualified at all, but they let me see a good show. Gilgamesh looked at the debris on the ground and said sarcastically, "If you could help me, it would be much easier." Wuming shrugged his shoulders. This king said that these things are not worthy of this king's help. Gilgamesh glared at Wuming fiercely. Yes, Yes, then let's go. The enemy is waiting for us. We can't lose the limelight. After dealing with Gilgamesh, Wu Ming said to everyone, "It seems that you're getting bolder and bolder, Hyunryong." Looking at Wu Ming and others who had walked away, Gilgamesh, who fell behind the crowd, said angrily. But then Gilgamesh's anger turned into joy, and he followed the crowd in his spirit form. Seeing your relationship with this king forgives your willfulness, Hyunryong. Thank you very much, king. Wu Ming smiled without turning his head. Soon, Wu Ming and others left the Yuzong Mountain Ludong Temple and came to the Yuzong Mountain Big Cave. Wu Ming, Gilgamesh, Cuculin, Matthew, Anna, Stheno, Urieli, Gadatsi, Olga Marie, Sakura Madu. 7 servants and 3 masters, the troops that caused the chaos of this era, arrived at the Demon King's castle. Chapter 368. Looking at the hole filled with magic, Gadatsi and the others couldn't help but tense up. Even Sakura Madu felt the danger inside the big hole and leaned into Anna's arms in fear. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. At this time, a voice came from the hole. After hearing this voice, Wu Ming instantly knew who it was. After all, the two of them had a deep hatred for each other. This voice is... Olga Marie was a little excited. Matthew and Gadatsi were also surprised. Even Roman, who turned off the virtual screen to make it easier for everyone to move, appeared again. Everyone looked at the shadow. A figure came out from the shadow of the hole, wearing a green top hat, green clothes, brown hair, and a gentle smile. Lev! Olga Marie shouted excitedly. That's right. It was Lev Lenor Floros. Lev, it's great that you're okay. Olga Marie was about to walk over, but she was stopped by Wu Ming and interrupted. Calm down, Olga. He came from the enemy's base. Olga Marie looked at Wu Ming and then looked at Leviticus. Although her eyes were still anxious, Olga Marie had calmed down and wouldn't defect to the enemy. After Wu Ming's persuasion, Olga Marie was now very calm. If it was the previous Olga Marie, she would have rushed over when she heard Lev's voice. Lev, are you still alive? At this time, Roman asked cautiously. It's Romani. I remember I should tell you to go to the control room immediately. Why didn't you listen to me? Although Lev still had a gentle face and tone, everyone could feel the anger in his words. Lev. Romani looked at Lev in disbelief. Now, not only Roman, but also Matthew and Gadatsi had seen that there was something wrong with Professor Leviticus. Lev, you're not a fake Lev, are you? Olga Marie asked Leviticus. Years of experience and habits made Olga Marie see that, as Wu Ming said, the other party was not a fake Leviticus. Yes, Olga, I am indeed Lev Lenor Floros. Lev smiled and looked at Olga Marie. By the way, you're also working hard, Olga. Lev said, It's okay, but I have a follower. Olga Marie smiled. She also saw that this Professor Lev was a little different from the previous Lev, but there was no doubt that this was the real Leviticus. However, Lev's words made Wu Ming's words. Later, as if confirming Wu Ming's guess, Lev said those words. You actually died a long time ago. Sure enough, Wu Ming frowned. Since Lev said to let Roman go to the control room, Wu Ming guessed that the explosion in the control room was Lev's doing. Now, it seemed that he was right. After Lev finished speaking, Olga Marie was a little sluggish and made a puzzled sound. I'm dead, Olga Marie said with some disbelief. That's right, Olga. I put the bomb under your feet. I didn't expect you to still be alive. No, I should say that you're still alive in the state of spirit, Lev explained to Olga Marie kindly. The bomb under my feet. Olga Marie's voice was a little trembling. Yes, Olga. Now you can't go back to Chaldea, because your body is dead. There's only one result if you go back to Chaldea. That is, with the disappearance of your consciousness. In an instant, Lev's expression became terrible, and the corners of his mouth almost reached his ears. I am already dead, Olga Marie said with a desperate and trembling voice. Director, Gadatsi, Matthew, and Roman were also affected by Lev's words, and looked at Olga Marie sadly. Pa! Suddenly, someone flicked Olga Marie's forehead. It hurts. Olga Marie covered her forehead and looked at the guy who flicked her forehead with tears in her eyes. You lost hope because of the enemy's words? This is not what my master should be like. Wu Ming looked at Olga Marie's eyes and said helplessly, humans are a group of creatures with short lives and afraid of death. But because of this, humans will do something when they know that sooner or later they will die. Then, Wu Ming turned to look at Leviticus. Let's not talk about whether this guy is lying to you or not. If we can't restore this singularity, I'm afraid that not only Olga Marie, but also Tachika, Matthew, and even Roman will die. After Wu Ming said that, everyone realized, yes, if the singularity couldn't be restored, humans would be completely wiped out in a year, and there was no difference between dying now and dying a year later. So, even if it was for themselves, in order to save humans, they had to win. And didn't I say that I can lend you my shoulder at any time? I like you very much as a master. Wu Ming smiled. I'm sorry. Olga Marie apologized and wiped the tears from her eyes. I'm the director of Chaldea, the master of the famous clock tower Animusphia, one of the 12 monarchs, Olga Marie Asmaret Animusphia, the captain of the team who restored the singularity and saved humanity. How could I fall here? At this time, Olga Marie regained her confidence. Lev betrayed me, but I still have my followers. I still have people I can rely on. I will never fall. Seeing Olga Marie like this, Gadotsi and the others breathed a sigh of relief and smiled with relief. Sure enough, assassin, you are a scourge. Looking at Olga Marie, who regained her courage, Lev looked at Wu Ming expressionlessly. Then I'm sorry. I especially like to scourge those villains, especially the fake gentleman wearing a green hat. With that, Wu Ming deliberately took off his black hat and made a noble salute. Did you know? I was going to burn down this era and give the Holy Grail to Queen Arthur. I was going to leave this era, but who told me to meet you? Lev didn't care about Wu Ming's mockery and continued speaking calmly. My idea is right. The last master of humanity can't do anything. The dead Olga Marie can't do anything. These tools' followers can't do anything. Then, Lev showed a terrible expression. The most important thing is you. But, in an instant, Lev returned to his amiable appearance. But it doesn't matter. You're going to die anyway. I'll be merciful and forgive all the things that annoy me. You really dare to say that? Bastard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Poochie. Chapter 369. For noble phantasms pierced through Lev's body. Gudazi couldn't help but turn his head away. No matter what, they were acquaintances after all. He really couldn't bear to look at it. Oh, Hero King is still grumpy. Although Lev was pierced through by Gilgamesh's noble phantasms, he didn't die. Everyone looked and saw Lev's body shaking slightly. This was obviously a projection. I've been in Chaldea for so many years. I can use this kind of projection. Roman and Olga Marie frowned. Lev then looked at Gilgamesh, who was expressionless. Ignoring the fact that Assassin is here, Hero King Gilgamesh is considered one of the best tools. I wouldn't dare to come alone. Bastard. Gilgamesh glared. Lev's word tool obviously angered Gilgamesh. I think so too. With your kind, it's unlikely that you'll face us. Wu Ming said sarcastically. Whatever you say. Now, enjoy the feast I prepared for you. Lev smiled at Wu Ming's sarcasm. After that, Lev's figure disappeared like a screen without electricity. This king will crush that bastard. With that, Gilgamesh's spiritual form disappeared. It seemed that he had entered the Yuanzong mountain. Don't we need to take care of this king? Roman smiled awkwardly. Roman's intention was naturally to be careful. However, Wu Ming shook his head. She's not angry enough to need us to remind her. Gil can help us find the way. You're really relaxed. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. Anyone who had a willful follower like Gilgamesh would have a headache. However, Wu Ming was very relaxed. I think I know her the best in the world. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Let's go in quickly. Then, everyone entered the big hole. However, the moment they entered, Wu Ming felt as if he had passed through a layer of film. Then, he found that the people behind him had disappeared, and his surroundings had turned into a maze-like stone wall. Is this an enchantment? Wuming frowned. It was probably the enemy's noble phantasm. Wuming could feel that it was an enchantment, and its level was not low. This is troublesome. After all, Wu Ming and the others had the advantage of having more people and being able to work together. However, the enemy's unknown servant used a noble relic to separate them, which was quite a disadvantage. It seems that I have to hurry up. Saying so, Wu Ming looked at his gloved left hand. Then, Wu Ming began to explore the labyrinth. It was actually very easy to crack this type of noble phantasm, that was, to get out of the labyrinth. However, in Wu Ming's view, this labyrinth was quite difficult, and he was afraid that it would take a while to crack it. However, it was better to move forward than to wait in place, and Wu Ming could feel a slight connection with Olga Marie. That at this moment, the sound of footsteps and night boots could be heard. Wu Ming looked at the two figures in front of him, ready for battle. Altoria and Leviticus. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Chaos Labyrinthos. Lev was the first to speak, looking at Wu Ming with a pleasant expression. Chaos Labyrinthos? Is that the name of this noble phantasm? Wu Ming began to think. Yes, I'll tell you directly. This noble phantasm is held by a monster named Militanos, but then again, it's really easy to control a berserker. Lev directly told Wu Ming the servant who held this noble phantasm and laughed at him. So, your purpose of separating us is to defeat us one by one, Lev? Wu Ming smiled indifferently. That's right, but don't be mistaken, I don't want to use King Arthur's sacred sword. Lev admitted generously. I think so. Wu Ming sneered. The feeling between Wu Ming and Lev was comparable to life and death enemies, and they would not let go of the opportunity to kill each other. You didn't leave this era, but stayed. I'm afraid it's because of this, right? Wu Ming asked. Yes, I don't know why, but when I think of killing you with my own hands, I feel very happy. Lev grinned and looked at Wu Ming ferociously. Spare, you go and deal with the last master of Chaldea. I specifically left them behind. Lev ordered Altoria. Altoria did not say a word and left step by step. It seemed that as Lev said, she wanted to deal with Wu Ming with her own hands. Wu Ming thoughtfully looked at Artoria, who was leaving. He always felt that Artoria obeyed Lev's orders for another reason. Then let's begin, assassin. Lev laughed ferociously, and his body began to squirm and change. As for the others, Gilgamesh looked at the empty space around him. This seemed to be the center of the labyrinth, and it was the size of a few football fields. Standing opposite Gilgamesh was a spearman in golden armor. A rat that escaped dares to appear in front of this king again. Gilgamesh looked at Karna with disdain. I have no choice. Only I can defeat you, so the master sent me here, Karna said emotionlessly. Then, are you ready to be cut into pieces? Instantly, countless golden ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh. Karna, who was opposite him, also raised the spear in his hand that was transformed from the Brahmastra. Stheno and Riley looked at the labyrinth where only the two of them were left and looked around cautiously. At this time, a scarlet eye emerged from the shadows of the labyrinth beside them. Cuculin put his staff on his shoulder and looked at the white-haired, red-clothed man with two swords in front of him. He smiled. You must be Archer. How ironic that you're using two swords. Didn't you want to fight me with your staff? The unknown heroic spirit said calmly. You're right. Cuculin put his staff in a spear position and pointed it at the unknown servant. Come on, Archer. After that, Cuculin rushed forward. The unknown heroic spirit also stomped his feet and faced Cuculin. Anna raised her scythe, and the person behind her grabbed onto Anna's cloak in fear, not daring to look at Sakura Madu. Opposite them, a man with two spears and a mole at the corner of his eye stood there. Dirty, Anna suddenly said. I'm sorry, but this is irresistible. Blame it on the fact that you're women. Gadotsi and the others came to a huge underground cavern. I'm afraid this is the depths of the cavern. It seems that Assassin and the others were separated from us by some unknown means, Olga Marie analyzed. At this time, The sound of iron boots stomping on the ground was heard. The dark night, King appeared in front of everyone. Everyone's battle on every battlefield had begun. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.